As a kid, I loved Kung Fu movies, so I went to Chinatown, trained with a wise teacher, and became a Kung Fu master. Sounds simple, right? Not really. My journey, like the study of Kung Fu, was as arduous as it was rewarding, filled with as many secrets as revelations and as much heartache as triumph. It's a defining moment in my life, and while I began studying Kung Fu to learn how to fight, what I discovered was a way to live. Martial arts never came easy to me. I was far from talented, and even farther from being the chosen one. It was only through years of tenacious perseverance that I was able to make steady progress. And so, I was surprised when my master told me that I should teach Kung Fu and share the art outside of Chinatown. I did just that and taught Kung Fu to my own students for 20 years. I always wanted to do more to share the art of Kung Fu with others, but was limited by only being able to teach those within my immediate area. What about the rest of the world? Then one day, I had one of the deepest insights about Kung Fu. I realized that the punches, kicks, throws, and myriad of martial maneuvers are merely the delivery system for the true essence of Kung Fu, the philosophy and way of life. Having worked for years as a professional artist and storyteller in film, animation, video games, and comic books, I realized that I could draw upon this unique skill set to share my passion for Kung Fu with the greater world. And so I created Shadow Ghost, a Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. The first issue is created entirely by myself, from story and art to colors and lettering. Every panel is filled with unprecedented accuracy in its depiction of Kung Fu by a comic book creator who knows from first-hand experience what it means to be a Kung Fu master. Shadow Ghost is a martial arts coming-of-age story about a young man whose search for the truth about a legendary hero leads him to study Kung Fu, and through a twist of fate becomes part of the legend himself. For the first time in comic book history, you can immerse yourself further in each issue with Kung Fu skills technology, powered by Tiger Crane Kung Fu. Scan the QR code at the back of the comic and follow an exclusive link to an online instructional video where I teach you Kung Fu techniques featured in this series. With Kung Fu skills technology, you can do more than just read about the Shadow Ghost saga. You can become a part of it. The first issue is completely finished and ready for print. All that's needed is for you to make a pledge of support so that we can fund the printing of the first issue. Together, we can share the wisdom of Kung Fu with the greater world. Shadow Ghost is the story of Kung Fu. It's about the people, the art, the culture, and the philosophy. It's my story and the story of those that I've learned from, taught, fought, and loved. Join me and become part of the vibrant legacy in a place and time where we might not be the chosen one, but where we can make a choice to be part of something bigger and greater than just ourselves. I'm Sifu Curtis Fujita, and this is Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master.
Hi, I'm Plugo, author, illustrator, comic creator, and the art director for Kung Fu magazine for more than 20 years. But I'm here to talk to you about a project that's really special to me. It's the middle grade graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale. Imagine the story of tigers and dragons and martial artists and monsters. So when I launched the campaign for A Tiger's Tale Volume 1, I did not know what to expect. But it succeeded thanks to a group of passionate backers. It was also awarded the Make More Comics art grant that year and was later featured as part of an art gallery exhibit. And that's why I'm coming to Kickstarter, to cover production fees, printing, copy editing, things like that. Books completed, with the exception of a few pages I've set aside for color over the course of the campaign. This turned out to be a popular feature of Volume 1's campaign, so I thought I'd bring it back for Volume 2. I think it's going to be great fun for everyone. Hope you'll support the campaign. I'm very excited about it. Thanks for stopping by. And we're back.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Comics Foo Show. I'm Curtis Fujita, and this is Patrick Lugo.
We switched, didn't we?
I know we did. We switched sides. Why don't you tell everybody what we're about, Patrick? You're always so good.
I always forget my cue, right? So we're the Comics Foo Show, and we stand at the intersection between Kung Fu, comics, and all sorts of pop culture. And today we're starting our indie comic cavalcade. I called it a spotlight in the graphic, but I had to go for that alliteration.
I like that. I like it. Very good. Yeah, so this is our second show today. And we have a really exciting guest, really cool project. Patrick, you had the initial contact with him, so maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about him and who we're about to meet.
Yes, so I've been following the Ennead Rule of 9 for a little bit. I caught it online, and then when the Kickstarter for the trade paperback came out last year, I had to jump on it. I was just checking, and their Kickstarter campaign is doing great at 99 backers, right? And so we have with us the author of the Ennead Rule of 9, J.L. Johnson Jr. So round of applause, everyone, as the man enters the stage. And here we are.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I know we've been crossing paths and catching each other via various channels. So it's so great to finally be in one place at one time, such as it is online, you know.
You would think that with all the different ways to connect that it'd be a little bit easier to do this, but time and time again, it proves to be tough.
Yeah, especially during a campaign. And congratulations, first of all, on getting your number six funded. That's
number 6. I also was at a convention this weekend, so pretty jam-packed weekend for me, but we were able to make it work.
Excellent. Well, that's some strong comics foo. So anyway, JL, I've been trying to explain why I'm such a big fan of your work to Curtis, but I think Curtis will get the picture instantly if you shot him that elevator pitch that you deliver to John Lasseter or Walt Disney if you were in the elevator with them.
Well, I would hope that this were a very tall building. But, like I said, fresh out of a convention, I left the convention about an hour away, drove straight here to hop on with you two. So I'm in a rhythm, so I'll just give you what I gave all weekend. When you begin reading any of the Rule of 9, you're entering the world of Amashik. And in the world of Amashik, there are a few pivotal things taking place at the beginning of our story. The first, you have Niawi of the Order of the Jade Crest, who is an ancient Halvin, which is my in-universe elf, basically, who is watching for the return of dark magic to the realms of men. A couple of hundred years before the story begins, magic is said to have been banished from Amashik, and it really only exists in pockets, and it's only the Hlavin who have full access to that ancient power source. The issue is that most of them perished during this cataclysmic event or have gone into hiding as a result. So Niawi is one of one. She is standing guard, making sure that magic doesn't gain a foothold once again. And unfortunately, at the beginning of our story, it's trying. So she has to set a series of events into place in order to stop that from happening. While that's taking place on the geopolitical front, you have Queen Ilaria Shadun and King Julius Caesar, who are the king and queen of the Republic Kingdom of Athea. The Republic Kingdom has been embroiled in a war for 52 years because Ilaria's grandmother started a rebellion and seceded from the Dabashi Empire along with 8 other noble houses. When they did that, they formed the Ennead. They wrote the Rule of Nine. The Rule of Nine states that every 3 generations, families must give power back to the people. People must choose a new 9 to lead them once again for the next 3 generations. Problem is, they've never really done this before. So while in the midst of a war, Ilaria has to choose her George Washington moment, as I like to put it. Does she step back, facilitate this new system of governance into place, or does she go for the Julius Caesar route where she decides to grip tighter, turn herself into a tyrant, and change the course of the Republic before it really gets started? And in between all that for her, she obviously has her grandmother's legacy to weigh in on. And then finally, the last layer of the Rule of Nine is given to you by a few action and adventure characters named Donatu, Dofoli, Gideon, and Lannis, who are spread across the map on opposite sides of the magic, the political factions, and they give you the eyes on the ground as these macro events occur and change the landscape of Amashik, both politically and magically. So hopefully we were going to like the 122nd floor.
Top floor, you're at the executive suite right now with the producers. But Curtis, do you see why I'm so into it?
Oh yeah, and I love like already, like the world building and stuff. I already can kind of feel the depth of it, which is great. I absolutely love that kind of stuff. So sounds
one of the things that I try to sneak in whenever I'm at a show. It's one thing to put a Kickstarter up, but you can't really, as you both know, trying to run campaigns, you got to get attention. So I would love to share that. And one of the things I have to do is get one of the fancy trailers that you two have. So at least while I'm trying to tell this, I can keep folks' attention visually. But I find that it shows, depending on people's reaction, I get the opportunity to add. And so when you bring up the world building, the world that we are playing in here when we are reading about and talking about the Rule of Nine is one that I started really as a world building project. So 5 or 6 years ago, which is about 2 or 3 years before I started the comic, I was just playing around building this world, cultures, religions, historical events, older wars, the cataclysm that I hinted at. All of that is built into Amashik, and it has been for some time. So when I'm telling a story, the way I like to put it, I could have told you a story pre-cataclysm. I could have told you a story 30 years from now, because these events all exist in a very large pile of digital world building notes. And I decided to choose this point because the political moment and the magical moment are kind of coming to a head here at this point in time in Ennead's history, or in Amashik's history rather. So I felt like this would be the best way to dive into this world for newcomers.
That's great.
And you know what? I was just reading it earlier, right? Refreshing myself on it. And one of the things I really wanted to zoom in on was that you start like, what do they call it? Media res. You start like right in. It's not like long ago, The Hobbit, this, that, it's just like you're right in it. Like, and then, by page, was it like 3? Heads are rolling.
Nice.
And so, I mean, I'm a big fan of epic fantasy, and I'm totally, before we get into the, some of the details, right? I want to get a picture of your, which I know in your bio you've read Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, me here too. So right on. But I want to know some of your other influences, if there are any. I want to know what you've been reading in the realm of other realms.
There definitely are other influences. Obviously the first that I can, go back to are things like The Lord of the Rings. Beowulf for me is a big influence in storytelling. I remember being introduced to Beowulf when I was 12, and that was, I remember leaving school after returning that book and then going to the library to get my own copy. And as a 12-year-old, that's not necessarily the coolest thing to do, but the book had that pull. So I remember pulling Beowulf, pulling Grendel, the story from the ogre side, and I loved that. And so I bring that up because questions of good and evil get turned on their head when you change the perspective. And that's one of the reasons why I love A Song of Ice and Fire so much. I think that one of the things that George R. R. Martin, among many, does really well in that series is plays with the idea of good and evil, and he centers it around what he talks about as the human heart in conflict with itself. And if you focus in on that and you start your story there, anybody's tale can be heroic or villainous. It really depends on, if that's your starting point, or if you're observing outside events and then trying to find the motivating factors after. So those are just three, some things that I'm currently reading or have read recently. Things like The Dark Tower, things like the Broken Earth trilogy, Brandon Sanderson, in the way that he can just tell a story from 20 different planets at the same time. All of these things influence me still today, but I think the three major things that got me started were Lord of the Rings, Beowulf, and A Song of Ice and Fire, in terms of those realms that really pushed me to want to do this on my own, because those are the ones that affected me most and affected me when I was youngest.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Yes, you were saying that it initially started out as like a world building project, and then it turned into this. What was was it just for yourself? You were just creating the world, or was it for like some type of project, and then it narrowed down to this kind of story? How did that come about?
So it was just for me. And as I was doing it, there's a website called World Anvil. There's another one called Campfire, which basically just exists as places where you can world build online. And a lot of times it's for storytelling. Sometimes it's for tabletop role play. For me, I was really just building it, hoping that I was inspired to do something with it. At the time, had you asked me if what I was doing was for a fantasy story, I don't think I would have said yes. Probably because I didn't think I could pull it off more than anything. So really, it was just a place when I had ideas and I had a story to tell. I could go and I could talk. There's an event that I'm writing. I'm currently writing the fictional world history as well for Amashik, at least the first volume of it. I don't think I'm going to try and stuff it all into one book, but I'm writing about this event called the Marring in the Mountains. And if you go back to my notes from years ago, all there is a particular mountain range, a year, and then this event called the Marring in the Mountains, where side A decimates side B. And that was really it. And then I went about my business, and I put a river over here, and I called it, this. And so when I went back to that with fresh eyes and more confident eyes, you could say, that Marring in the Mountains served a purpose, because now side A and side B they had a lineage now. I was telling the story of side A and side B when I was writing The Rule of Nine. And so I was able to look at those notes and be a little bit more confident. But I think in the early stages, I was probably just doing it to flex this storytelling muscle in a way that was extremely private and no one ever had to see.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've tinkered with World Anvil, but it's one of those rabbit holes, right? If you decide to start putting your time in that, you might not find time for other things. And 100%. I'm behind enough on my deadlines.
I think it's that kind of, I would imagine you felt this, but it's kind of like when I was working on my book, you're creating it, but you almost feel like you're discovering the world, right? Even though it's your creation, right? But as you're going deeper, it's like you don't know where these things come, but they come to you, and you're navigating it and discovering it. And that's just like such a joy, isn't it?
It's so fun. And one of the things that, every time I get to do a show, you spend 16 hours in a weekend talking about your work to people who are excited, not your friends who you're forcing to talk to, or anything like that. People who are really into what you're doing. My friends are into it. I don't mean to be rude to them. But you find new ways to talk about it. So one of the things that I was saying this weekend, or I found myself saying, is I feel like I'm both dungeon master and every player at the table at a D&D session, a long campaign. And so that I say that because, as the DM, I'm the one designing, I'm the one telling you where you're going to go on this campaign. But as the player, I don't necessarily know how I'm going to react when you put X obstacle in front of me. And so that discovery has become more real as I've gotten deeper into the story, because I knew who, for example, Anatu, who's one of the main characters, I knew who he was when I started writing him. And I kind of knew what general direction I wanted to push him. But as I got to know him better and write him more often, I recognized what he would and wouldn't do, what he is and isn't all about. And so now where he is in the narrative, where he is at the end of volume 1, is not really a place that I imagined him at. He's troubled by something. He's been trying to run from something, and it's caught up a lot sooner than I expected it to. But it just made sense when I was actually in the story and in the world to frame it that way.
That's great. That's great. And I like that you said campaign, which I think is a excellent segue, because there's a live campaign right now for your book. So maybe, and Patrick, if you have it, maybe we could start kind of going over it, and JL can kind of guide us through what's going on here.
Voila.
There we are, like magic.
And so this is who we've just been speaking about, right? Inatu, who we have right up front. Am I correct in that? Am I
Yes.
remembering correctly? All right. So shall we start with this video?
Yeah, let's do that.
There's no fancy trailer, so don't worry if it doesn't load.
Yeah, it's not
going.
It's not playing for some reason.
I can give you what it says. I know what it says because I didn't give you this before. I talked in more broad strokes, but as you dive into the campaign, what you are looking at is a special edition of Volume 1. This is really a celebration of where Ennead has found itself over the last 2.5 years, thanks to 5 Kickstarters and somewhere just shy of 600 total backers across that time. We are now looking through Anatu's eyes and Anatu's eyes only. He's really become a bit of a fan favorite. So in order to celebrate that, I wanted to come out with this spot foil cover here. So pretty much everything that is on that cover that's metal will be in a nice, pretty spot foil for those who decide to back at the highest tier. I'm also bringing these little mini Eurosas along for the ride. So this is Anatu's weapon, which is something I know we'll get into. So I'll save a little bit of this. But I wanted to create 100 of these in honor of Kickstarter's Make 100 campaign. I also grabbed 100 of these collectors that tell the story of Anatu's journey in Volume 1, and also just show off what he can do when pushed. And so with that, you'll get a few other exclusives, some special stickers, special cards. I'm throwing in extra variants, and it looks like we're pretty close to another stretch goal. So there'll be another print added here, hopefully very soon. So the idea is to stuff that collector's box with all of the things that have really stood out, all the moments that have stood out in Anatu's journey thus far, and our journey. I say our, referring to myself, my team, and the backers who have made this whole thing possible.
Looks great. And I love that box. I love that going that little bit of an extra mile, just to make it that much more satisfying. That's excellent. Great box.
It's really something. I mean, I've done package design. Curtis, have you done package design?
Not too much. No, I don't believe so. No.
I've done a few things, right? Boxes and clamshells and the like. So, the fact that you made the decision to go with the box, love it, and then the fact that you're seeking to fill it, I mean, that's brilliant, and clearly, like, we're not alone in thinking that, right? You've got the 99, a nice solid number, but let's hope we can push this into 3 digits.
Yeah.
That's the hope, and one of the things about the box, I've seen, there are certain things that you see when you look across the indie comics landscape, and I've seen so many people with these collector's boxes, and I've always wanted to do one. It was one of those long-term goals that I ended up preparing for this campaign and recognizing, well, wait a minute, I think I have enough. I think I can do one. And so the fact that so many of my repeat backers were excited enough about what I'd created thus far and put out in the world that they were willing to back at that tier was just a really great feeling, because a big part of this is you being extremely vulnerable, putting your stories out here with no real big budget support behind you. And when you find your tribe, it really is, it's a great feeling. It's just like when you talk to someone at a show and you can see their eyes light up, and you know, less about you having that sale or know you're going to be able to close. You know, you found a fan, you know, you found someone who's excited about your world. And that to me is way more sustainable than, you know, trying to fight for a particular number of sales or a particular number of backers. While those things are all great and they make it possible, I want people who are going to want to go on this journey with me, because I don't plan on stopping in the near future.
That's great.
Oh yeah, and your world goes deep. I mean, you have a Substack devoted to it, as well as your online presence. Yeah. So I was wondering if you wanted to go a little bit into that, or if you would rather go into some more details with the campaign.
I'd love to talk about the Substack. The Substack is one of the things that I'm most excited about. I knew what Substack was when I started this journey. I wasn't really paying it much attention. And then some of the big names in comics, you know, the Snyders, the Tinians were signing deals with Substack, and that caught my eye. So when I took a look at what you were able to do with a Substack, the way I like to explain it is basically an old school blog combined with a MailChimp account. And basically now I don't have to wait for you to happen upon my blog. When I have something that I want to share with my audience, I can send it directly to their inbox. They can read it right there. They can come online. They can read it in the app. So it's a really, I think, user-friendly application. But what I'm doing with Substack is a few things. One, I just mentioned, newsletter. I'm staying in touch. As you both know, you have to stay in touch with your audience in order to do what we're doing here. And it's an easy once every 2 weeks, you know, just quick wrap up of what I'm doing. Every Tuesday, I'm releasing a page of the comic. So folks who don't really have the means to back on Kickstarter but want to enjoy the story, they can read along. It's slower. It's more like that Webtoons model, but you can get the story that way. So I'm 55 pages or so into volume 1, which is somewhere around 180-ish. So it'll be posting for a while, but I think that's a good thing. It gives people time to catch up and see what we're doing. And then behind the paywall, mostly, I do release some of the following for free every now and then. I am taking scene by scene and giving special author commentary on how I decided to come up with whatever you are seeing on that page. So the way you mentioned the heads rolling in the beginning of the book, that wasn't going to be the first scene. I actually just broke down 2 weeks ago, maybe the scene that was going to be the first scene. And it was a way milder. It was actually a mother and a daughter playing a game like not unlike chess. And I got some really good advice that was going to bore half the readers to death, and you would never get your series off the ground if you did that. So I didn't do that. And then to double down on it, I even changed that scene and made that scene a duel instead. So I do things like that, give you insight there. I break down the magic system. I break down the political structure. I break down, all types of historical events that are the underpinning to the events you're seeing in the comic. Every now and then I put on my bard cap and I embody a character named Jolyn Lovett who exists in Amashik, and I give you his perspective on what's going on. I like to do that, every couple of months to give a big breakdown of some of the things that have come up over the previous post, just so folks get a summation of what they may have missed. And it allows me to embed a bunch of links so people can go back. And so one of the things that I love about fantasy is the ripple effects, the things that people get to do with your world when you're not there. And I say that because I've spent a whole lot of time in places like Middle Earth and Westeros without Tolkien or George R. R. Martin's permission. I've just hung out there in places like subreddits and coffee shops and in my own mind. And so I always wanted Amashik to have that. And the Substack allows me to put more out there so folks can inhabit the place when I'm not around.
That's great. That's excellent. And it's kind of an exercise, right? It kind of keeps you sharp for the main project, the main narrative, right? So that's amazing.
Which
I
reminds me,
love it,
actually,
man.
I actually forgot one thing that I'm doing there, and that is writing prose chapters. So
Oh,
one of the things that I eventually want to do is make this span multimedia. So I have been filling in the blanks. So when you, for example, the scene that is in front of us, Anatu gets in a little bit of a scuffle, but eventually we move off Anatu in issue 2 here, and we go to someone else. Well, on the Substack, and I haven't gotten to this chapter yet, but on the Substack, what I would do is I would fill in the blank with about 1,500 to 2,500 words of prose to let you know what Anatu is up to in the interim. And it lets me practice a little bit. It gives my editor that I work with an opportunity to understand my prose writing style versus my comic scripting style, and it gives my audience an opportunity to get used to the same. So that is another thing that I do on my Substack as well.
oh, that's great. I was just playing Skyrim the other night, and it's like, if you ever played that game, my gosh, there's like books everywhere in that game. And I'm constantly just stealing the books and holding on to them and weighing myself down. Every now and then I'll read them, but the world building is just insane. I mean, all that kind of prose, and it's done in world, kind of narrative. It's great. So I love that kind of world building.
The amount of times I've played Skyrim and the amount of consoles that I own Skyrim on is embarrassing. So I know exactly what you mean.
Well, if you haven't noticed, I've made a particular point to linger on these fight scenes because they're fight scenes, and well, I mean, comics foo, right? You and I, JL, you and I chit-chatted a little bit about like the concepts and the practicalities of world building and martial arts, within a fantasy world. And then we have Curtis here who's doing both, right? Martial arts in a fictional world and in ours.
Yeah.
So Curtis, is there a specific name for this move that we're seeing?
I think the proper term is hitting somebody in the head with the back of the weapon, but I could be wrong.
It's about as technical as I get.
Hit him real hard. No, I love it. I love it. I was just thinking, I was looking at the weapon before the show, and that's like one of the big things is using the back end, using both sides of the tool. So it's great to see it represented in your book,
There are a few influences for the weapon, and some of them are personal and some of them are just pure curiosity. And so I came upon the man catcher, the historical man catcher, which, if you don't mind, maybe you can see is a little bit closer to that design there. This was the original design of a Natu. And so that is, if you Google man catcher, that's the weapon you're going to see. And shout out to Dario, who is an Italian artist that I worked with in the early developmental stages, who designed this version. And then Luke Horsman gnarlied it up a bit more. But the idea was I didn't want to tell a story where my character was holding a sword. And I love epic fantasy and I love swords, but so much of epic fantasy is about swords as MacGuffins, swords as family heirlooms or magical things, and I just didn't want to do that. Not because I'm knocking it, but I think it would have made the Rule of Nine less its own story and more a derivative of something else had I done that. So I was just looking for unique weapons, and the man catcher popped up. And I've always, as a kid, I loved Donatello. He was my favorite Ninja Turtle. And so the bow staff there, and that was always something that I was intrigued by. And so, same thing with, pole arms and whatnot always intrigued me in games like Skyrim and just in historical study. So I wanted to tell a story where that was the central focus, where that was the weapon that became synonymous with my story. And so that's kind of the big picture, the historical and the non-personal reasons why I chose that weapon. But then the others, I played a little bit of lacrosse when I was in high school. I started late, so I wasn't very good, but I had fun. And as an athlete, I was able to do some things that had I not been as athletic, I certainly would have been able to do. But one of the things that used to drive me nuts is my best friend was a really good defensive lacrosse player. So he walked around with that 6-foot stick. And anytime I thought I was doing something, he could just do whatever he wanted and really just de-stick me all the time. And he used to drive me nuts. He was the person who taught me lacrosse. And so I just remember, no matter how hard I tried, no matter what I did, he could move it with such grace as someone who played for so long that, again, that kind of influenced this man catcher as well. And then in recent years, I've actually started training. I manage a CrossFit gym as my full-time job. And as I play on the fringes of fitness to be ready for my community, to lead them, through this, using this methodology, I started practicing with the mace bell. And it was almost like that was the perfect storm. Right before the world paused in 2020, I had ordered my first mace bell. So while writing Anatu's character and imagining those moments in the empty lacrosse field where I'm getting just demolished by someone with this longer tool, someone who could keep me at distance, and then the mace bell training, I was like, this has to be the weapon. And so while I don't have any technical or formal training with the mace bell, the movements that you do, the movements that you use do have their historical and ancient fighting cousins, you can say. And so it was just a nice coming together, a nice streamlining for me, where I can remember sitting in my living room or in my backyard, imagining Anatu's fight scenes with either a PVC pipe where I'm mimicking the lacrosse movements, or while I'm using the mace bell. And so that's where that weapon comes from. That's where the fight scenes were actually choreographed, if I dare call it that, because I did choreograph those scenes with that PVC pipe, something that I wanted to be true to. So while it may not line up with any real technique in our world, certainly in the world of Amashik, I imagine that every Rakita, which is Anatu's title, from the Kavanian Navy who earns a Yorosa uses it like my buddy used to use that lacrosse stick. That's how I imagine it. So if there's ever a time where there's a live action adaptation or there's something like that, I might be calling a martial arts expert, or I might just be calling a professional lacrosse player. Who knows?
Well, that's excellent. And that's what I love about independent comic books, is this is uniquely you, right? It's a fantasy world, but it's an amalgamation of your experience. Had this been something mainstream, who knows if that weapon would have been the choice? It could have been, well, I think a sword, we've done surveys and swords are more popular, or this, so forth, more marketable, so forth and so on. And it wouldn't have that defining nature that's you. I think that's the common thing that we see through all of our independent comic book creators, is it's personal, in the best way possible, so that's great. Good. Hats off to you. Very cool. Yeah.
When I was young, I ended up ordering a copy when I moved to the West Coast, but I used to have the illustrated encyclopedia of weapons, because that's where I discovered the man catcher for the first time. And I did try and roll up a D&D character who used that as a specialty weapon. And you can't find the +1 man catcher anywhere.
I imagine that's pretty tough. I love another thing, about just you bringing up that encyclopedia of weapons. That's one of my favorite parts about writing this story, is the moments where I'm not sure about something and I have to go down one of these rabbit holes and I have to figure out, okay, what would a man catcher have been made up of, and how sturdy would it have had to have been to be used as not only what it was used for, which was, holding those high ransom targets at arm's length or more so, so they couldn't hurt you and couldn't get away, et cetera, but also as a defensive weapon, as we see Anatu use it. So that was when the research on the staff really went into play. And so while I don't have any firm answers as to whether or not, maybe I do and I don't want to share, whether or not this Yorosa will make it to the end of the story, or if it will morph, or if Anatu will be forced to adopt another weapon. There's actually a little bit of a hint in my shirt, but I'm not going to stand up and give it again. You'll have to watch the stream as to where he might end up if and when that does happen. And that has roots in another culture that that did exist, and that the Kavanians do embody a bit. And all I'll say is that that's Viking culture. I think all of us right now, pop culture has an infatuation with Viking culture. And so I certainly am not immune to that. And so I wanted to create a culture that had both the grace and the patience that it would take to wield a Yorusa and not, maim or kill their targets. But I also wanted a culture that had kind of the ability to be on its own and to stay free from, there's the shirt again, and stay free from, outside influence in a world that has some pretty powerful players on the geopolitical stage. So I knew they couldn't be complete pacifists, but I did want that juxtaposition. And you see some of that in Anatu's character throughout volume 1 as well.
That's great. Great shirts.
Thank you.
Shirts are awesome. Look at him. There he is again.
Nice. And I love the silhouette of his hair. It's such a big, important thing to have that great silhouette that defines a character.
I think he in terms of, so another thing that I can share about Anatu, he didn't exist in the early drafts of the story, which is one of the other reasons why I'm so proud of him as a character. And I wanted to center this first special edition around him. When I first wrote this, I had some very good friends, the ones that I kind of disparaged at the beginning of the stream, who read it as a comic book script. And that was one of the most kind acts that anyone's ever done for me as an adult, to read a script. And these weren't comic book fans. These are just friends of mine who, like me, had a lot of time on their hands early in 2020. But one of the most common pieces of feedback that I got was, hey, great story. I love what you're doing, but I don't know why I'm looking at all of it at the same time. Like, there's no adhesive, there's no glue, there's no convergence point in my perspective. And so I said, okay, that's good advice. And so that's where Anatu came from. So the Kavanian culture existed before Anatu existed. And the reason why I chose Anatu to be in the center of the story, in part, is because of the relationship between Kavana and Athea. So I talked about side A, side B. I won't, in the Marring of the Mountains, but during that time, this is probably 100 or 150 or so years before the events of our story, the political landscape, the allies, the folks who were at each other's borders, clashing for territory, was completely different than what we have now. And from the fallout, the Kavanians decided to distance themselves from the rest of the geopolitical kind of power structure in Amashik. And so one of the things that they vowed to do was never to step foot on what they refer to as the mainland. So part of the Kavanian culture is stranded in the mainland, but those who fled to Kavana, which I can talk about the naming there and some of the ties to their language and their culture if you like, but those who fled there vowed never to go back. And so Anatu fleeing there, running from what he's running from, he knew he wasn't going to be pursued. And so it was kind of this perfect way for me to pluck what was one of my favorite cultures, but didn't really have an upfront role to play in the Rule of Nine, and give them a role to play. And so by doing that, talk about discovering as you write, I discovered a role for Dofoli, who we meet in book 6, who is another Kavanian, and we meet her with her crew, with her band of Raukitas as they go on a mission. And so I get to do a lot of things because of how embedded these characters were in this already existing world. And but Anatu and this weapon and this conversation really wouldn't have existed without that feedback. So it's another just cool tidbit that I like to share.
Oh, definitely. And I just kind of want to compliment you and point out to the people watching, if you notice when Jail's explaining this, he says it with such conviction and no hesitation. That means he's really thought this out. That means he is an expert in his world, as opposed to, I was thinking maybe this, maybe that. I haven't decided. No, I mean, he is laying it down, telling you exactly how the world was built out and all these things. That shows a great deal of time and effort, And
I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, excellent work.
Right, he's a kung fu master in the lore of his world. I mean,
exactly. And I have to say, those Rosas are amazing. That is such a great add-on. We see so many of the same kind of add-ons. And that's something you're trying to manage, right? Shipping, fulfillment, all those things. And that's just such a neat little addition for people. Really, really. Yeah.
As Kickstarter creators, we have to walk a fine line, because while we want, and I don't know how far this we expands, but there is there's a number of us who want to do as well as we can without putting too much of a burden or asking too much of our backers, right? I genuinely try not to do gimmicky things. I try to create things that I think tie to the world, tie to your experience as a reader, and tie to your future enjoyment of the Rule of Nine. And so I struggle sometimes, even T-shirts. For a long time, I didn't offer T-shirts because in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but if this is your first time in this world, do you really want a T-shirt? But then by the time I got to Kickstarter 4, 5, and 6, I'm like, okay, maybe now's the time to introduce the T-shirt, because I didn't want someone to have to pay extra shipping for a shirt they didn't really want. And so the Erosa really is just an early tease at how I plan on bridging that gap in the future, because this thing, they're the size of, I have a bunch of pens and pencils right here. So this is your standard Bic LED lead pencil, not LED, but lead pencil, and it's the same size. So this thing will fit.
It's great.
Very easy in a comics mailer, even easier once I start bringing out these collector's boxes. So I can do these types of things. I can do these types of mini prints. And to me, this is, if I were able to get, Ice from Game of Thrones in this style, I'd put these all over my desk. They would just sit there next to me to inspire me while I worked. And so I think that I found a sweet spot that not many people are utilizing right now in the indie comic space, but it's all over Kickstarter with the 3D minis and the printables and things like that. So I'm going to explore this route for the rest of the year for that reason. And the hope is that as I do more and more of it, my readers will become more accustomed and get a little bit more excited about them.
Definitely. I like how you're saying it about being experienced. You see quite a few Kickstarters where they just start throwing random stuff. It's almost like you're at somebody's shop buying something, and then they just, you're buying, they just start taking pens off the desk. And what about this notepad? Do you want this notepad too? And I have this half-eaten sandwich, it's corned beef. And you're just like, whoa, what does this have to do with this thing, right? And this is a perfect example of doing it the right way, where it relates.
And it's tough because I do want to, because some people really do like those things. I love pins. I put pins on my jacket. I put pins on my book bag. But I've never created a pin series. I think that a pin series would do well on Kickstarter, but in the same way that it took me a while to figure out how to embrace the 3D minis, I don't know how to really bring that into the experience of the world yet. I'll figure it out. And when I do, I'll introduce pins, because I think they also ship really well. They don't hike up the shipping costs. They're easy for backers, but I haven't quite figured out how to make it experiential. And so I'm trying to, trying to wait until I do. But when I do, they'll be there.
I mean, that's what's so awesome. Like, because you've built trust, right? You're building trust with your backers, and I mean that's something that can't be overstated, right? The value of that, because that gives you that like option to experiment. I was telling Curtis, like my big experiment for this campaign are ninja stars, and what they're stamped. So they're let me get a better one with a better stamp. Look at that, right? And they're safe.
I was gonna say, how'd you manage that? There you go.
Well, I love about both of things that you're touching it and you're feeling it, right? Both weapons you're actually touching. That's a whole different experience than just the paper. So that's great.
And for a nod to, and I pair them with this special edition. I'm the artist who sculpted this is actually a reader of the Rule of Nine, which is another layer of just awesome. That someone who found my book on Kickstarter, who I have never yet to meet in person, will meet one day. Shout out to Orly. We'll run into each other at some convention or some premiere of some kind of something one day. But she was so touched by the work that she started doing this on her own. And when she would randomly send me like little screen grabs, like, oh yeah, I got a new project. And it took me a while to figure out what she was doing. And it wasn't until she showed the unique kind of butt end there, the head would have given it away. When she showed me that, I was like, wait a minute, what do you like? Can I see more? And then when she showed me the whole thing, I was like, I got to pay you for that. I'm going to commission you for that. And I want to use it. And so we did that. And it's really cool that in this moment where I'm celebrating where Ennead has gotten in the last few years, right at the heart of it is one of my backers. And so I'm genuinely excited about the ability to make this a shared experience. And this is just one of those ways that she and I won't ever forget. The folks who have it and have a really cool little desk toy, they might not know that. They might not read that part in the Kickstarter. They're just going to enjoy their Erosa. But she and I will always have that. And I think that's the type of relationship that any fan of any story loves to have with its creator. And so I'm excited to start doing those things as well.
That's excellent.
That's so awesome. So I have to ask, I keep seeing that you're Rosa, and I just want to know, is the outer edge sharpened? Is it also a blade? Did I miss that detail?
So the top piece is not a blade. These can puncture. So the way that I thought about, again, I mentioned pole arms, and you think about the halberd, right? And the way that it has the pick on the back of the hammer. Again, I'm giving away some of the other things that I wanted Ennead to carry at first, right? Because they were easier to find, and they were also pretty cool and pretty gruesome. But I didn't want him to have a hammer or a blade on the other end of that pick. I wanted him to be able to disarm and be a hero without being completely brutal if he didn't need to. And I call it the Batman effect, right? And I call it this to myself. I don't run around talking about this, but Batman, I think, Superman, all these characters that are so iconic are that because they do their best not to kill. And I know that that's become unpopular as things have gotten grayer, and I understand that in this world, Ennead might have to, like in his past, take another life. But I didn't want him walking around with a weapon that made it impossible for him not to. And so those are there, if he needs to, slow someone down who's in plate armor, he can turn that head around and puncture the plate armor. He'd have a hell of a time getting it out, but it's something that he could try, and not just have to worry about that steel butt end, to save himself when he wants to be offensive. Obviously, he has the mouth of the Erosa. One of the things that also, one day I'll get an action figure designer to figure out how to get this little piece to move, because this piece will clamp. So it pushes onto your neck, and then once your neck is in here, it clamps closed, and so you're now stuck. That happens early on in issue 1. So I wanted a weapon that would allow me some space and some creativity when I was writing. Again, like Batman. Batman can stop you 1,000 ways. He could also probably just beat you to death, but he never does. And so I wanted that, because that to me is one of the reasons why those characters are iconic.
Yeah, and that scene you just described, that's like within pages of the opening sequence too. So it's just like bang, bang, bang. You're in it, right? And your life's in peril the moment you open those pages, and that's an awesome way to read fantasy.
If I could speak to that, because again, I said I got some really good advice there, but I knew that I wanted to introduce my characters in a way that felt true to them. And I actually went back and forth. I didn't want to share Ennead's name initially. Really wanted him to be like this man with no name type character. It is one of my regrets that I did share it, but it is what it is. But in that moment, some of the feedback that I got early on was, why is he doing this? He just gets off a boat. He's in this new place. Like, why is he so quick to act? And my answer is always the same. He has a very, very, very clear moral compass. He has a very, very clear sense of justice. He does not have an issue acting on that. He's been trained. He's hardwired to do that. So when he sees something taking place that he can very clearly make out to be outside the law, he acts. It's just, and it's part of the reason why he ups and then, spoiler alert for issue 1, leaves, because he's like, I'm here not to do that. And if I'm gonna be pulled into doing this so quickly, I can't stay in a major city. So he hits the road and he tries another way. And he wouldn't be the central character if he found peace in issue 2. So he doesn't find that either. But the point is that he's very clear on what he's running from, but he's also very clear on who he is. And he can't just stand down when an innocent man has a knife to his neck. And so that's why we get that scene.
Awesome. Curtis, what do you think? Is this one?
So you'll have another backer very shortly. So, but no, excellent work. You know, you can hear, you can't fake passion. You can't fake that level of caring. You know, the conviction you have is tremendous, and it looks like a great book. So we can't wait to see more and see the campaign be even more successful as it approaches the finish line. We are winding down now, but is there anything else you'd like to let people know about the project, or anything else coming up, or where they can find you?
Sure. So the easy part there is where I can be found. The hashtag or the tag underneath the screen, Ennead _ the rule of 9 is my Instagram handle. If you start typing Ennead _ in any search bar, except YouTube, I'm not super active on YouTube, I will pop up. And so that's real easy to find me online. My Substack, I think, is the place to go if you want the meatiest bit that I have to offer online. It's where I do the bulk of the long-winded stuff outside of the comic. And it's also where I plan on investing the most time in the upcoming year. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well, also Facebook. But if you want to really get what the world is about, I think Substack is the place to go. And so that would be Ennead the rule of 9.substack. But again, start typing in Ennead into that search bar, and that'll all pop up. In terms of sharing things about the world, or the story itself, you know, the campaign, again, I'm thrilled that this is now 6 for 6 on Kickstarter, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't have that support. My backers know that I'm extremely grateful for them. But the world itself, I've spent so much time in it, and I have developed so much of this story that I really have, over the last few years, seen how far it stretches. And so over the course of this year, I've got some really ambitious goals. The first is to complete Volume 2. Volume 2 is already halfway done. Based on the way this Kickstarter turned out, the first 3 books in Volume 2 will likely hit Kickstarter sometime in May or June. Later in the year, I'm going to come out with either my world book that I teased or the first book in what I hope to be a novel trilogy. And the reason why I'm going that route, I mentioned I want the story to span multiple mediums. And the way that I look at it, the events in the comics, you have a set number of viewpoints. The events that will eventually take place in the novels, they'll hear about in the backgrounds. It'll be chatter at the taverns. They'll react to it. They'll respond to it. And then the inverse will be true. The events in the novel will be shaped by some of the decisions that our comic characters make. And I have a really ambitious goal of threading the needle with Volume 3 of the comic and Book 3 of the novel, where you can have a really immersive and just full view of how the landscape of Amashik changes. And last piece here is talking about discovering the story. I had an aha moment the other day where I realized how one of my characters will close their journey in the comic arc. And they may be one of the few that leap from comic to novel, but I had that moment and I saw that. And so I say all this because I want creators to continue to think big. I had a thing on my wall that my mom put up when I was a kid, and it said, never let anyone dream for you. They'll never dream big enough. And I obviously took that to heart. So I'm really appreciative of you both having me on. If there's a return policy and you have folks come back, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to come back on with you and chat some more.
Definitely.
Oh,
sure.
100%. I mean, there we go. We didn't even get to show you Curtis's weapon collection, which he happened to just, come on, Curtis, show that blade.
This is just the dining room table in the Fujita household. We have a dragon knife here. Why not? The kids kids love it. So that's here. But for next time.
You got to get into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we gotta, and then when it's time for a certain origin story, and we get to see the young character taking his licks, learning how to really wield that weapon. I think I could connect you with some people who can help you work out some specifics. You know what I'm saying?
There
Absolutely.
you go. We'll take care and good luck with the campaign.
Thank you.
And we'll be seeing you soon. Okay, take care.
See you guys.
Thanks again. Talk soon.
Congratulations. All right. So I guess before we move on to our next guest, we'll take a quick break, show our trailers. Does that sound good?
Yes. Hold on. We've got some special guests
Yes,
just waiting. So, but first.
Okay. So that was my cue. That was my cue. In 3, 2. As a kid, I loved Kung Fu movies. So I went to Chinatown, trained with a wise teacher, and became a Kung Fu master. Sounds simple, right? Not really. My journey, like the study of Kung Fu, was as arduous as it was rewarding, filled with as many secrets as revelations and as much heartache as triumph. It's a defining moment in my life, and while I began studying Kung Fu to learn how to fight, what I discovered was a way to live. Martial arts never came easy to me. I was far from talented, and even farther from being the chosen one. It was only through years of tenacious perseverance that I was able to make steady progress. And so, I was surprised when my master told me that I should teach Kung Fu and share the art outside of Chinatown. I did just that and taught Kung Fu to my own students for 20 years. I always wanted to do more to share the art of Kung Fu with others, but was limited by only being able to teach those within my immediate area. What about the rest of the world? Then one day, I had one of the deepest insights about Kung Fu. I realized that the punches, kicks, throws, and myriad of martial maneuvers are merely the delivery system for the true essence of Kung Fu, the philosophy and way of life. Having worked for years as a professional artist and storyteller in film, animation, video games, and comic books, I realized that I could draw upon this unique skill set to share my passion for Kung Fu with the greater world. And so I created Shadow Ghost, a Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. The first issue is created entirely by myself, from story and art to colors and lettering. Every panel is filled with unprecedented accuracy in its depiction of Kung Fu by a comic book creator who knows from first-hand experience what it means to be a Kung Fu master. Shadow Ghost is a martial arts coming-of-age story about a young man whose search for the truth about a legendary hero leads him to study Kung Fu, and through a twist of fate becomes part of the legend himself. For the first time in comic book history, you can immerse yourself further in each issue with Kung Fu skills technology, powered by Tiger Crane Kung Fu. Scan the QR code at the back of the comic and follow an exclusive link to an online instructional video where I teach you Kung Fu techniques featured in this series. With Kung Fu skills technology, you can do more than just read about the Shadow Ghost saga. You can become a part of it. The first issue is completely finished and ready for print. All that's needed is for you to make a pledge of support so that we can fund the printing of the first issue. Together, we can share the wisdom of Kung Fu with the greater world. Shadow Ghost is the story of Kung Fu. It's about the people, the art, the culture, and the philosophy. It's my story and the story of those that I've learned from, taught, fought, and loved. Join me and become part of the vibrant legacy in a place and time where we might not be the chosen one, but where we can make a choice to be part of something bigger and greater than just ourselves. I'm Sifu Curtis Fujita, and this is Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master.
Hi, I'm Plugo, author, illustrator, comic creator, and the art director for Kung Fu Magazine for more than 20 years. But I'm here to talk to you about a project that's really special to me. It's the middle grade graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale. Imagine the story of tigers and dragons and martial artists and monsters. So when I launched the campaign for A Tiger's Tale Volume 1, I did not know what to expect, but it succeeded thanks to a group of passionate backers. It was also awarded the Make More Comics art grant that year and was later featured as part of an art gallery exhibit. And that's why I'm coming to Kickstarter, to cover production fees, printing, copy editing, things like that. Books completed, with the exception of a few pages I've set aside for color over the course of the campaign. This turned out to be a popular feature of Volume 1's campaign, so I thought I'd bring it back for Volume 2. I think it's going to be great fun for everyone. Hope you'll support the campaign. I'm very excited about it. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for stopping by, Curtis.
I'll see you guys. Bye. See ya.
So, for those who are joining us at the top of the hour, we're the Comics Fu Show, where we stand at the crossroads of comics, kung fu, and all sorts of popular culture. And Curtis, I'm really excited to have some guests. Our next round of guests. One is an old friend. He's what I call an old school internet buddy. We met at the dawn of the internet age, and we've kept in touch since.
Nice.
And then with him, we have one of his partners, or I should guess formally say his publisher. So let me just start by introducing Tony Wolf and Eli Schwab.
All right. Hello.
Tony, welcome. And Eli, welcome.
Eli.
Forgive me if I mispronounce any names. I know. Let's get that all worked out.
Yeah.
I know. And here's Daisy. Can you hear me, bud?
Yep, sounds good.
Guest starring my puppy Daisy.
With a cameo. Oh, well, you know, she knows I've been wanting to say hi to her, so that's great.
She's very sweet. She was all resting, and suddenly she heard activity and came to life. Okay, Daisy. Okay. I know Patrick. You have a dog named Milo, right?
Yes, Epic Milo. He's over there. I've had to barricade my room because otherwise he'll be here.
Because otherwise this would happen.
Except more loudly.
Okay. Yes.
So
thank you for having us on. And Curtis, this is my first time meeting you.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you. Meet you both.
Same here.
Definitely.
All right, I'm excited.
Yeah, so welcome for coming on. I'm so glad that you both have made it. I know, Eli, we chatted here and there. So, I mean, last time was on a Facebook. No, it was an Instagram live session where you were talking about none other than Tony's book.
That's right.
Tales from the Wolf.
Yeah, I think we had just released it at that point. And I wanted to have mine right here too, but I shipped all the ones that are in my office here. I got to go back down to the warehouse/garage and get more.
Excellent.
That's all right because I have it.
There we go.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The man himself. So Tony, since you're meeting Curtis from the first time, and we've been taking these elevator rides up and down to the penthouse of Netflix production studios, and so here you are trapped in the elevator. I guess both of you are trapped in the elevator with Curtis. It's roomy enough. So
what are the production studios like, Curtis?
What's the production like?
What are the Netflix production studios like?
They're kind of like the garage, kind of like how Eli's storage is is the garage. It's
I was just trying to paint a picture for your elevator pitch.
yeah,
Now
exactly.
go.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So let's
Go
hear
ahead,
all
Tony.
about it.
So, Tales from the Wolf is 220 pages of mostly autobiographical comics, very much in the vein of Harvey P. Carr and autobio-comics in that world. There's also a few articles which are comics which are more like articles. I've done 4 comics for the New York Times, which are essentially part autobio and part history. And Eli published it and has been consistently amazing and wonderful. My dog just settled down now, so that's also wonderful.
Yes.
Eli has been an incredible partner, supporter. We designed the book together over Zoom. Eli, what was that like for you? And thank you again for doing it.
It was very fun. Honestly, Tony, you're a joy to talk to, full of energy, like very passionate about your work. So that was just very enjoyable to share with. And like exactly what you said, I would have InDesign up on my computer. I'd share my screen. We'd go page by page. We laid it out once through. Then we went back through and did art design. Then we went through it again and did, copy edits. Then we went back through it again. And we just did that over and over and over again until it was perfect, exactly what we wanted. And it was so much fun. It was enjoyable. It was like creative back and forth. It was just like a really great way to work on something with someone. And like, we're so lucky we have Zoom because I don't know.
Yes,
we
yes.
had the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, Eli was looking to expand his publishing line, and I had been looking for a publisher for several years. All of these, essentially, it's a book of collected short stories. And many of them have been web comics, which were readable on various sites, some in the New York Times and some on smaller sites. And I had never collected most of them in print. There had been some mini comics published by my colorist for this book, Griffin, who colored, I would say, 75% of this book. And but I'd never had a book before, like a book with a spine, a book that was full size. And I always envisioned, essentially doing short stories for 10 to 15 years. And I said to myself, as I was cobbling away, writing, drawing, and hand lettering each one, I said to myself, one day I'm going to have enough stories to do a paperback book. And my goal was to do it by the time I was 50 years old. I didn't get it in for 50 years old, but I just turned 51. And so now we have a book. I was a year late to that goal, but I'm so thrilled that the book exists. And the other quick thing I want to mention, my concept always was that 3/4 of the book would be all these stories, some of which have been in anthologies over the years. But the final quarter of the book would be like a back matter, almost like a miniature art book snuck into the back. So for your $20, you get not only many, many comics, including 4 comics that appeared in the New York Times, but you also get a little miniature art book full of one-off illustrations and art for various projects. I did a drawing for the Neil Gaiman documentary. 2 friends of mine, who Patrick also knows, I think, through the website that we all met through years ago, and we should talk about that. These documentary filmmakers followed Neil Gaiman around on one of his world tours, and they became very close with him. The documentary is called Dream Dangerously, from about 5 years ago. I did a drawing for that. That goes in the back matter, like one-off illustrations or covers I did for friends' indie books. So that's a summary. And I felt like the obvious title was Tales from the Wolf, since my real last name is Tony Wolf. And then I thought, if I'm calling it Tales from the Wolf, then the cover has to be a Tales from the Crypt EC Comics homage, where I could have little bits of each story glimpsed, essentially.
That's great. Well, I already see Greedo, the McRib, and the Death of Robin in one book. I mean, what's not to love? I mean, has that ever happened? Is that the crossover of all crossovers?
There is definitely some of the feedback I'm getting is that there's there's a wide range of topics and stories covered. And it's funny, Eli, do you remember when we were working on the book? And Patrick, you may have been through this as well, and Curtis, when you work on your stories, right? All of you, because Eli makes his own comics as well. You sort of, if you've spent years looking at it, you're so familiar with it, you almost forget what it might look like for another person who's not familiar with the work to read. And I did an interview yesterday with a friend of ours with a podcast called The Comics Lounge, Ryan Balcom, and he was like, these stories go to so many different topics, and I'm so used to the book because we spent so many months with it. I was almost like unaware that it has many different topics. Eli, what
you're like, did I cover enough topics? Do we have enough stories? I was like, we did. We definitely did.
That's great.
Well, I mean, they are about one topic, right? They are about Tony Wolf, and then everything else is a reflection of that.
Mostly, although a couple of the stories are not. A couple of the New York Times pieces I did don't involve me. One of them is just a straight up history piece, like almost a documentary in comics form. And 2 short stories, I wrote 90% of this book, but 2 short stories were written by other writers. And they asked me to illustrate them. And I really like these people and I really like their work. So I was like thrilled. I said, yes, once in a while, I will illustrate a story for another writer if I really feel a simpatico and I'm excited about the material. And Patrick, you know that friend, it's Alex Hernandez wrote one of the stories.
Yes, exactly. He and I have collaborated as well. And, you know,
yes.
he was the editor for the
stories that he wrote, right?
Yeah, I've illustrated a couple of stories, one of his chapter books for young readers. And then he was also one of the editors in the anthology I was a part of in 2021. So, which was just, there was 3 comics. The rest was, well, it was comics, prose, poetry, and the play all in one book.
Yes.
So, but no Guido. Did I say that right? I think I might have messed that one
Guido
up.
He's the Italian version. Guido is the Italian Star Wars.
Right? That's for the unreleased cut, right?
Yeah, that was excised by George Lucas.
Right, exactly. Sometime before Han Solo shot.
So, by the way, we should tell people Patrick and I met online. We've never actually met in person, but we've been friends for, I want to say, 13 years, approximately, at least, right?
I suspect we might have to add a decade to that, Tony. I mean, when was the internet invented?
That's actually true. So we met through a website, a message board. Curtis, do you remember message boards?
Oh yeah, BBS. I remember.
This was a message board that was initially inspired by the comics writing of Grant Morrison.
Oh, nice.
And it was partly inspired by The Invisibles, which Grant Morrison wrote for DC Vertigo. And thus it was called Barbalith, because Barbalith is a mystical thingy within the and Eli, you know The Invisibles too, right?
Of course.
So this was a website called Barbalith. I want to say you're right, Patrick. We have to add a decade because the website was 1997, 98, right?
Yes, I don't want to admit it either, Tony, but
that's okay. That's okay. We've earned our years, man. We've earned our stripes.
We've earned our whiskers for sure.
So we were both on there, and as was Alex Hernandez and a bunch of other comics fans, and we became friends. And did you illustrate one of Alex's Jenny Everywhere stories back then, or no?
We dabbled in a bunch of stuff, but I was much better at starting projects than finishing them back then. Okay. So the Jenny Everywhere never went anywhere. Okay. And there was a few other. It took a while before I could nail in, the ending projects. But
okay, great.
But yeah, I remember also.
Patrick, you've then since gotten very good at completing projects because you've done quite a number of projects since then, stories and graphic novels.
Yeah, so far so good. I'm just one. We're only as good as our latest victory or failure. Maybe, I don't know. I'll stop with the platitudes because I really want to focus on the fact that Tales of the Wolf is so, it does what comics does so well, because it's telling multiple stories, right? There's a unifying theme because they're coming from you. You're functioning as the crypt keeper for your own autobiography, and but still, like, your obsession with the McRib, the your participation in the death of Robin, I don't know. I mean, maybe I think Curtis, being the one who isn't as familiar with this work, and I've been catching your work since what, Dracula flew to Hindenburg, and into into Doom. I can't finish that sentence. Help me out here.
So there are 3 short stories that I did not write, because that one that you just referenced was written by Demetrios Fragiskatos, who owns 2 comic book stores in Brooklyn and Queens. And he envisioned a graphic novel that told about Frankenstein and Dracula. What if they were frenemies through the years? Like, they were friends, then they were fighting. And there's many, like, every decade we see them through they're basically almost immortal. So it's a story device that allows you to see them through many decades. And I drew a flashback sequence where they fight on top of the Hindenburg blimp in 1945, 44. And they are the reason the Hindenburg blimp crashed, which I thought was because they're fighting on it, and their fight becomes so explosive that it crashed. So I always liked that idea. I thought that was fun. So
does that story make it into the collection? I have it here, but I haven't gotten fully into it. So
yes, that story is in there. I wanted to include, basically the book is 85% stories that I wrote and illustrated. And the other stories, there's a smattering of other stories that other people wrote that I illustrated and lettered.
And so that one's now out in color, because I remember it originally came out in black and white, if I remember correctly.
Yes, quite a long time ago. Yes. Color was added a while later. So essentially, Curtis, you're probably wondering, what the heck is all this, right? So I started doing autobio-comics about my neighborhood in Brooklyn. And I've read autobio for decades. So I really tried hard to not do the same old autobio stuff, because I'd read so much great autobio. I thought, I have to try to bring something new to the table. Not that my life is revolutionarily fascinating, but try to give stories that I hadn't seen done before. So I did several autobio stories. Those started getting some press from some magazines in New York and some of the media in New York. And then I said to myself, okay, I've got Brooklyn stories, but I have to be like Madonna. I have to reinvent myself. I can't just do the same autobio thing. That's going to get boring for readers. So then I thought, I'm a huge comics fan. What if I did comics about being a comics fan? And then I said, well, I've never seen that done. I've never seen a comic, or very many. There have been a couple, I think. But at the time, which was 2015, I wanted to do a comic about what it felt like to vote to kill Robin when I was a teenager. And then I said, oh, I could do a whole bunch of stories about being a comics fan that I hadn't seen covered extensively in comics blogs, in the comics press, etc. And then I was like, okay, what other weird topics can I cover? And then I said, I'm going to do a comic about my favorite strange, unusual ice cream dish. And that, I eventually was able to pitch that to the New York Times before it was printed. And to my shock, the food department of the New York Times took it and wanted to publish it. And that then began a relationship with the New York Times, where I kept coming up with weird food stories, if that makes sense. So Curtis, what do you make of all this?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, it sounds almost like, looking at it on the screen here, it kind of looks almost, for lack of a better word, like a conversation. Like when you're reading it, it's like how a conversation can kind of meander between two friends and go from one subject to the next. And let me tell you this anecdote, and this is this. So I kind of like that kind of coffee shop kind of vibe that I'm getting from it, that you can really kind of go deep. And
well,
I really,
thank you. I mean,
yeah.
I definitely, that's great feedback. A lot of it is definitely like almost every comic is my inner monologue, which, as Eli knows, can go to many places. I mean, Eli, talk about the book, or, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I think you're.
Oh,
I think
we're not hearing you.
Sorry, there were some planes outside, so I muted
sure.
myself. I was originally drawn to Tony's work just because I also really, really love autobio. I read a lot of Crumb growing up and Kurtz or Harvey Pekar. And right now I'm loving Ginseng Roots. That's like one of my favorite books. I just picked up
Craig Thompson, who did Blankets.
Yeah, Craig Thompson. I just got Blankets to read. So I'm like really psyched on Craig Thompson. And our friend Adam Lemna kind of connected us and was like, I think that Tony's like looking, no. Adam Lemna just posted comics that you had sent him. And I was like, oh, I got to get me some of those. So then I wrote you and you were like, well, I think we just started talking and I was at that point trying to like diversify the brand, trying to get more books, more artists to work with, more stuff to go. I was redoing the website and I was looking for this, a lot of people and a lot of different types of comics to get to bolster the brand. And then, so I was just like psyched on your work. We have another mutual friend, Ben Granoff, that I do the Devil in Detail, the Grendel Reread podcast, weekly, syndicated on YouTube or Instagram. Anyway, and just his recommendations and his like, I just anything he says, I like take, at face value because he's got amazing, impeccable taste. So then, I just, as soon as I read more of your stuff, I got more and more excited about it. And then, man, once we started working together, it just really went off. And I think even we did an interview, or we did a thing for Wizard where I was checking in with all the people who sent in submissions for the COVID Chronicle Wizard, which is just basically like another anthology that we did over COVID. And I was checking.
But of course, it is inspired by Wizard magazine in a loose way. Curtis and Patrick, I don't know if you read Wizard back in the day.
Yeah, I remember that.
Actually, funny story. When I was working for Kung Fu magazine early in the day, I would pitch, what's his name, Garib Sheamus. I would pitch him articles about, like we were in negotiations, and it never bore fruit because he decided to shift gears and go into UFC. I don't know if you folks remember that.
Wow.
He put all of his Wizard funds towards founding another competitive UFC kind of league.
Wow.
I love this deep cuts.
Yeah.
Right. So that's I gave you the ending of the story first, right? So the thing was that during Kung Fu magazine, I was pitching him a column and he was into it, where I would write like the Kung Fu background of comic characters, what martial art Batman studied, or, what kind of Kung Fu style Richard Dragon really should be. Just that kind of stuff. This is in the 90s, and, Kung Fu wasn't as popular as it is now. And I was in that rarefied position, hanging out at the studios of Kung Fu magazine. But yeah. So that's my connection with Wizard. We emailed back and forth a bunch, and then he kept asking me about UFC and how much he's into UFC and mixed martial arts. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but how about this article? Can I do this article? And that the only thing that came of it is this story, but it's mine and it's precious.
That's great. So Eli started this massive. Is each issue 300 pages or 400 pages?
No, the first one was like 248 pages.
Wow. Oh, that's a great X-Men riff. Great cover.
Yes.
Thank you. That's David Browers from Canada, as well as colors by the previously mentioned Ben Granoff. But the second one ended up being 420 pages.
My gosh.
It just really took off. And because it was during COVID and I got so many submissions, I decided to take off the like editor hat and just take every single submission and publish every single submission, because just people needed it at the time. Everyone, I just wanted it to be a real communal thing while we're all trapped. The first one actually was set to release March 2022, or sorry, March 2020. And we all know what, March 2020 was the great shutdown of the world. So it was kind of crazy. I ended up shipping it out mostly during the very start of COVID there. But then the second one was just fully done during COVID.
Wow. Well, I have to commend you on your background there because there's people that you see them do live streams and you can tell like every Funko Pop on the back wall was bought in the last month or so, and they throw in the bounce sled, the red bounce sled. But I mean, you have the real deal back there. I see a Moebius Silver Surfer print. I mean,
Yes.
you got
I got all my records. I
TMNT
got a
stuff.
Grendel mask.
Oh my goodness. Yes. It's
That's
like
the turtle wall mostly. All my turtle stuff. Jim Mahfood right here. AC Farley, Peter Laird.
Wow.
This is the Kevin Eastman page. That's a Jim Lawson page, inked by Eric
That's
Talbot.
a Peter Laird sketch?
That's a Peter Laird sketch, yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
Colored by Steve Levine, and then that's a Eric Lawson. Not Larson, Lawson.
Okay.
And this is a Feral Dalrymple Tuvok from Star Trek Voyager.
Ooh.
Awesome. It's like going into somebody's law office and you see the degrees from like Harvard and all these prestigious schools. As a comic book fan, right?
These are way more meaningful.
Oh, right? Totally.
Right. I mean,
by the way, I apologize that you're seeing like my living room, but basically because we have the dog here and my wife is away, I wanted to make sure that she wouldn't be. So if I sit on the floor with Daisy, she'll be chill after that initial excitement. So.
Got it.
Oh no!
No need to apologize, Tony, because it's just like a nice mellow hang, and that's also what we like here at the Comics
We're
Crew
sitting
show.
on the floor in Tony's house.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, it's funny. There's a whole art form to setting up your thing for Zoom, right? I remember when DC did their Comic Con. I forget what it was called, but they had a DC Universe or whatever kind of Comic Con, and I think everybody was just getting used to this idea of being on Zoom. And you would just see the funniest stuff in the back. You would see somebody's couch with just like a sheet over it, and looked like there was a dead body for some reason. I saw somebody with a bookshelf with like a half-eating burrito on a plate, like maybe they were eating just before the stream, and so I think we've all learned, right, over time how to stage.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff on Zoom, so I really wanted my frame to be full of joy and comic love. So
definitely.
What do we have here? The Cosmic Lion comic book store here?
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say, like, we want to see your bona fides, right? And so we've got them behind you, but I thought I'd let folks have a glimpse that of what's going on.
So this is the Cosmic Lion website.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We newly launched recently. We've got a bunch of new stuff. The new hotness here, that's the Space Knights, Weird Myths, Tales from the Wolf. The Space Knights zine is also another amazing new addition here with the 3-page fold out from Kevin Anthony Catalan.
Wow, look at that.
This guy is an artist to watch.
Wow.
Absolutely, man.
Wow.
He's on his way up. And I mean, he could easily be doing Marvel and DC work. Frankly, I think all of his work is better than a lot of what goes on with Marvel and DC. I mean, this stuff is glorious.
Wow, look at that.
He has this amazing character studies at the beginning of this. Like, absolutely.
He almost reminds me a little bit, I'm meaning this as a compliment. Patrick, do you know who Daniel Warren Johnston is?
Yes.
Is that the right name, Eli? Daniel Warren Johnston?
Yeah, it is. He did Wonder Woman. He did Beta Ray Bill. Do a Power Bomb.
He did do that recent the Broken Earth with Wonder Woman, and he did something for Image that I discovered was how I discovered it, and I'm
Murder Falcon.
Forgetting
I think it's
which
called
one?
Murder Falcon is one of his books.
I think it was. I'm remembering it as like a kind of a post-apocalyptic sci-fi, but one of the main characters wasn't a warrior but an artist, and so it's like the whole.
I can't remember what that one was.
I'm totally. I remember.
I've seen what you're talking about, but I can't remember what it is either.
Yeah, it's
Star Trek
one word name. It was good. I just loved the whole conceit of an artist, trying to cope with all of the crazy stuff, and I guess it spoke to me.
Kevin Anthony Catalan is an amazing talent that Eli has just published, and you're going to be seeing that name a lot in the comics world.
Yeah, you absolutely will be. His art is well, Daniel Warren Johnson is amazing as well, but Kevin.
And by the way,
amazing.
they both have 3 names, so there's a commonality right there.
That's right. Kevin Anthony Catalan, and you have Danny Warren, John San. So you have Space Knights, and you have the Space Knights, which is the reprint of issue 1. And issue 1 is like 120 pages of this.
I was
going to
say, how is that just one issue?
I don't know. And he's working on the second one. It's going to be the same length.
Wow.
He does these amazing, like hand painted, like ads in the to put up the chapters.
Wow.
So good. Bolt Blaster 4000. Looked like Ball Buster, but it's not. But yeah, I mean, he does this amazing work.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. So that's pretty amazing.
Gorgeous.
We got the Ghost Agents Treasury Edition. That just came over.
Wow.
Printed on newsprint. Oh, got that classic newsprint smell. Nice. Very intense. But this is a new big one. Our Kickstarter was fully funded, and I'm about to start shipping all these out. Still,
nice.
Most people haven't seen it, so that was the deep cut. Cool. And of course, I've got my mini comic collection as always.
Yeah, I really like that, man. And I love that the cover is a tribute to Kamiko or Kamiko.
Of course, Kamiko is the proper pronunciation.
I was always wondering. Yes, Kamiko. Okay,
that's great. That grid.
And that's got a couple of autobio stories from your life, right?
Oh yeah, many autobio. I kind of mix it up with autobio and then strange little weird one-pagers like Bob Marley in the Negative Zone, or Frank Zappa versus the Space Mutants or something like that.
Wow.
Ace in Space. Ace Ventura meets Guardians. But so awesome. A lot of fun stuff like that, you know.
Excellent.
It's amazing. I mean, I'm loving seeing all of those examples, and I'm just loving how like you're playing with the standard format, but you're also not constrained to it. Like Tony was mentioning about like the significance, and I can relate to it, like the significance of having your book be comic sized, right? Especially nowadays, people are going with that, with the smaller size, the young reader size. So to have that, you know, have your book fill a comic bag means something. But then what you're doing, right, is like you're totally just like, this book is going to be square. This book is going to be oversized.
All different sizes,
Yes.
I do have a square book as well too, but that's because that one was like a Instagram-based comic with a comics collective called Next Panel Press, and so because it came out all on Instagram, that was just the chosen format, square. So I have a square book.
Is that Elonia?
That is Citizens of Elonia. Yeah, I've got one over here. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, I've even got another size. We really do play this. We've got
I mean
CK's Ghost Agents, like chick tract style format as well.
Gosh.
Which is like 2x2. Craig CK killed this.
That's very cool.
I gotta put this up on the store because we've got some of these left. And then the
Craig
Citizens
CK?
of Elonia was. Say it again.
That was Craig CK on art.
That's Craig CK on art and colors and everything.
Oh, this is yes. This was on Next Panel Press.
That's right, yeah. And this was just kind of a strange mixture of different stories where like the main character is really like a planet. Mm-hmm. And I was going just stream of consciousness, and it just kind of like went crazy. I don't know. The planet got stolen and sent into another planet and then turned into some marbles like the end of Men in Black. And then it just kept going out and out and broke the fourth wall, and then further out broke that fourth wall. It was just that crazy.
That's awesome. So is that like, would it be safe to say that that's what like Cosmic Lion is about, is like breaking those walls in terms of format or in terms of subject?
Yes, absolutely. And you know, there's no boundaries to what I'm looking to publish, to what I want to publish. We also have the weird myths, which I don't have one right here. And that one's 8.5 by 11 magazine size. We have artists; those are creators from Turkey, or Ozan from Turkey, and it's all wordless, really amazing. They're almost like animations, and I feel like when you read this book, it kind of just like self animates in your head. The more you read it and the more you go through, like your mind just kind of like does it because of just reading and seeing. It's really, really cool. So there's that. I'm working with Barry Tan right now, who's another amazing artist. The Cartoonist Kayfabe guys just covered his new book, and I'll be publishing it in the United States, the Contraband Comic Cavalcade. It's right. I'm just working on it right now. So it's really fun. The guy's an amazing
satire of Image Comics, kind of.
It's a send up of Image. Yeah, it's kind of got like a couple stories, like the ABCs of Image Comics, which is kind of like this history. It's got Splitting Image 30 years later, which is like a kind of check back in with all the original Image creators with Barry's inimitable style. And some pinups as well, and just like amazing like Ninja Turtles stories. It's interesting. There's a story he did for the 1963 thing that we're working on as well. That was also reworked as a Ghost Agent story, so it's published in its original form in there, as well as like a 2-page Turtles comic, a 4-page. A 4-page. Yes, a 4-page comic with Street Angel versus Billy Kincaid, that original Spawn villain. So it's got a lot of really fun stuff.
And Patrick, quick sidebar, by 1963 he means the Alan Moore written 1963 that he did with Image.
Yeah, I almost found those in a flea market, and just as I was picking them up, the guy was like, "I changed my mind. You can't have them." Yeah. So I was like, that was probably a mistake. They were in there in the first place. Curtis, of the.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Of which we speak, right?
Yeah. Well, that's great. Very cool.
Yeah, there's so many great comics out there, and I've got a list of 10 books that I'm looking to publish this coming year as well.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. That's awesome. And so
by the way, I have to convey I love many things about Cosmic Lion, but one of my favorite things is their slogan. Can I say it, Eli, in my voiceover?
Of course,
voice?
yes.
Cosmic Lion, comics of every kind for every mind.
Nice.
I just love it.
I originally, what's that?
No, go ahead, please.
I originally pitched that slogan when I was working at a music venue in Vermont called Nectar's, which is a beautiful venue in Burlington, Vermont, where the band Fish got their start, a favorite band of mine. And I pitched it there as music of every kind for every mind, and they didn't pick it up. They didn't use it for this like shirt contest, though I did win the shirt contest. They used my design, but not my logo or not my thing, which is good because now I can use it again for Cosmic Lion because it's smart and catchy, and it is really what I'm trying to do. Like,
it says your mission statement.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So yes, I'm just kicking that. I've got one, like I just got books from all over the world, like France and from Canada, and of course from here, from Ben Granoff. Hopefully another one of my own books I'm trying to do if I can find the time. And it's crazy because like I grew up in a very small town of Cumberland, Maryland, and the first time I ever saw an indie comic was in this. We didn't have a comic book shop. It was like the paperback exchange that sold paperback books and also had comics. And so I found this like underground comic. It was just stapled paper, and I kept it in this like locked drawer in my thing all this time. And so recently when I went home to like clean up my room or whatever, and I found it, and I was like, I bet I can find this dude. He's like got to be on Facebook. So I found him and reached out to him. All of a sudden, like, turns out he's already in the Cartoonist Kayfabe group. He's working on his new book. And so I'm like excited to like hopefully help him get his book out as like this kind of full circle thing of like,
who is the guy?
His name's Gary Kramer, and I think his book is called The Paranormal, I believe. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, he's in there. He plays in some bands around my hometown, and I kind of always knew his bands, but I didn't know that this was the guy from the comic.
That's an amazing full circle.
Yeah. So I'm excited to help him out.
First underground comic you ever saw in your life.
That's right. And apparently he worked at Paperback Exchange, and he knew all these people, and He knew Kay. Of course, he knew Kay, the owner, who later turned the store into a witchcraft and occult store, which I was still like, okay, I'm down for this.
Yes.
Every
By
mind, every kind.
Yeah.
Quick sidebar. I know, Eli, you're old friends with Ben. Do you know a guy named Sal Cipriano or Cipriano?
A little bit. He lettered a book that we worked on, and I was reading some Vertigo book or something recently, and I saw that he lettered that too.
Yes. He was a letterer, and he also wrote and drew his own comics many years ago. I knew him from a message board. I think that's how I met Ben, was through Sal.
That's how I met Ben too. I haven't really known Ben for that long. Only a couple years through the kayfabe group.
Oh God, I thought you guys.
When we realized that we're like, we just realized that we're like basically the same bearded Jewish man that loves the Grateful Dead and Grendel, and we're just like, we're the same dude. So like,
you're soul brothers.
Best friends. Yeah.
Yes.
It happened quick.
But yeah, this guy Sal Cipriano eventually became a letterer for Marvel, DC, for tons of books. And I think now he's freelance. If you guys ever need letterers, he's great.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Were both of you always headlong into the indie scene, and that was your interest, or were you kind of in the mainstream stuff as a fan, and then kind of gradually became into the indie stuff, or what? It's an interesting story.
I was always a mainstream fan first, and then like a lot of readers, I still read superhero comics, but then I started finding out about indie stuff.
Yeah.
Really in the mid to late 1980s with even things like Kamiko, but then I got a hold of American Splendor by Harvey Pekar. I started seeing the work of Dean Haspiel, who now I'm good friends with, and he gave me a quote for the book. And I just started discovering more and more indie stuff. And for me, like I still read superhero, but I also got very deep into the indie scene.
Yeah.
So Eli, what was it for you? What was your path?
Yeah, same about for me, but it's interesting because like really looking back, because my first love was Ninja Turtles, and technically Ninja Turtles is Mirage, which is technically an independent book. So I guess my start was independent, if you consider Ninja Turtles independent. I was young enough to where I bought a couple Mirage books and I was like, this is scary. What's going on here? Michael Zulli Turtles? I don't understand this.
Yes.
I remember getting those books when I was really little and I was like, what the? And so then I moved to like the Archie books and quickly became huge into Marvel. Generation X, Chris Bachalo, but Chris Baccello, I think is the correct I've learned recently. And so yeah,
I never knew how to pronounce his name either.
Yeah. I know we read these names and we never really know. Yeah. But recently working with, Grendel and stuff, I've learned that it's Kamiko, and then working with some other people who worked on Shade the Changing Man with Chris Bachalo. Now they say it Bachalo.
Right.
Yeah.
Another one of those names is Bill Sienkiewicz, right?
Oh, I know.
Gosh.
Which I didn't know how to pronounce for a long time. I would just take my best shot at it for a while.
Yeah.
I had to ask him direct. He was one of the first creators I ever met, and I was just like, how do you even do that?
Right.
Well, my question, Tony, were you able to pronounce it the first time you met him? Did you just go for it anyway, or did you be like, did you find a workaround?
Well, I mean, when you meet a famous creator at a convention, you don't often say I call it the Charlie Brown effect. Like in the Peanuts cartoons, everyone says, hello, Charlie Brown, but I don't walk up to Eli and go, hello, Eli Schwab. So I met, now, I don't know if this is where you were going, Patrick, but Bill Sienkiewicz gave me a quote for this book. For this book that Eli published. There's a quote on the back cover. Bill Sienkiewicz, Eisner winner, Eisner Hall of Fame, Emmy nominee. He's right up here. And that for me, I'm also an actor. That to me feels like Martin Scorsese giving me a role in his movie or something. You know what I mean? To get Bill Sienkiewicz to endorse my indie book and say, Tony's work absolutely stands alongside that of Robert Crumb, Linda Barry, and Harvey Pekar. I would, I can die now, guys. But I started to I met Bill at small conventions in New York City. I want to say in the 80s or the 90s. And at that time, in my teenage years, I was determined to be a Marvel and DC artist in my teenage years and childhood. And then I kind of fell out of love with drawing all the time because I'm a pretty social person. I'm a weird mix of introvert and extrovert. And I got more into acting. And acting is creative, but it's with other human beings in the room. Whereas, and you both know, everyone here on this Zoom knows, even though it's not Zoom, that making comics means you sit alone for hours and hours to write it, to draw it. Curtis, you said you've done coloring also, right? It is labor intensive.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so I didn't draw much throughout my 20s and 30s. I kind of was like my dirty secret. Like I wanted people to think of me as an actor, not as an illustrator, because I was afraid of being called a jack of many trades, master of none.
Yeah.
And so when I met Bill Sienkiewicz at these small conventions, I met him as a fan, never thinking that like 30 years later, I would be getting a quote from him from my book that I wrote and drew. But when I hit 40, I was like, I'm not getting acting work, but I wasn't getting much acting work. And so I was like, maybe I should get back to trying to do some comics, if only for fun. And every story in that book is pretty much a passion project. My tactic was to crank out 2 or 3 short stories a year and hope that I could eventually collect them in a book. And then I got very lucky and got, lightning struck. And now I have 4 New York Times credits that I wrote, researched, and illustrated, kind of like playing journalist, right? I got to play Clark Kent, where those comics are like my train of thought mixed with a journalism article sensibility, but it's all illustrated like a comic. Anyway, years go by. When I did the story about killing Jason Todd in the Batman comic, and what that was like, I was on Twitter and I used to host a podcast. I used to co-host a podcast called The Action Room, and we interviewed a lot of celebrities. And this is back when like podcasts were new things, right? So because we had a geek podcast before there were 8 million geek podcasts out there, we started getting invited to red carpet events in Manhattan, interviewing celebrities for major movie premieres. And because I'm an actor, I was very comfortable being on a red carpet, joking around and bantering with a celebrity. I wasn't really like intimidated or scared. Anyway, we built up a little bit of a Twitter following, not enormous, but something. And then I tagged Bill Sienkiewicz. I basically sent, once that Batman comic came out, it was on Bleeding Cool. Bleeding Cool printed the whole thing in its entirety. It was an 8-page story. And I put a lot of work and research into it. So I started tagging Jim Lee, Bill Sienkiewicz. I was like, at the very least, these people might read a free webcomic, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's about Batman, and no one else had spent 6 freaking months doing a whole comic about what it felt like to kill Jason Todd. And Jim Lee, Scott Snyder, Bill Sienkiewicz, they all read it. And some of them retweeted it. Like Jim Lee retweeted it, Bill Sienkiewicz. And then Bill Sienkiewicz started following me on Twitter. And I was like, okay, I'm very thankful. This is 2017. Right? Or 2015. And that article, that comic about Batman got in New York Magazine and Vulture, like their pop culture thing. So now Bill Sienkiewicz and I will occasionally like talk on Twitter, kind of banter. And I really tried not to push the gas pedal on that too hard because he's Bill Sienkiewicz. So I would only kind of like say hi to him sporadically because I didn't want to overstay my welcome or presume some real deep. And then I would see him at conventions and always just take some time and talk to him, really more about his stuff. And then over the years, he started taking more of an interest in my comics. And at one point, he pulled me aside at Mocha and was like, what you're doing is really good. It's really special. Like, he sat and talked to me for 15 minutes. And I was like, once again, it was like Martin Scorsese pulling me aside to talk shop for 15 minutes. I was pleasantly stunned. So as the years go on and I started to think about this book and I started to think about who can I get for quotes, right? Because when you publish a compilation, you would like some quotes. and he was like the Mount Rushmore. And I was a little bit, now he and I have then, he started like writing on my Facebook about my parents. Oh, your family looks really nice. And your parents, like he started taking an interest in my life outside of my comics. And I'm sure that he is just trying to be encouraging to young creators whose work somehow somehow their work resonates a little bit with him. And he's trying to be a mentor. He's trying to encourage, which if any of us get massively successful, we all would like to do, right? For the young kids. So I was talking to Rick Parker, who illustrated a lot for Marvel, who drew the Beavis and Butthead comics for Marvel. He lettered for Marvel for many years. Rick Parker just sold a book to Abrams Arts, which is going to be a pretty big deal. And it's about how Rick Parker was a bohemian, artsy bohemian who got drafted during Vietnam, and what it was like to be a bohemian, artsy hippie who got drafted during Vietnam. And that book I've seen a lot of, and I think that's going to be a major book. Anyway, I went to Rick Parker. This is the end of this long story. I went to Rick Parker and I said, I really want to ask Bill Sienkiewicz. Rick Parker had already said yes to giving me a quote. I said, I got to admit, Rick, I'm a little nervous. It's Bill Sienkiewicz, you know. And it's like, do you have any advice for me? And he was like, dude, you're 50 years old. Your work is great. Take a swing for the fences and ask him. You have enough of a friendship with him. He's written on Facebook about your personal life. He actually gives a shit a little bit, like at least a little bit. Ask him. Ask these pros. You know, the worst he can do is politely say no. And encouraged by those words from this guy who knew Bill Sienkiewicz as a personal friend and everything, I asked him, and he said yes. So that's the end of that very long story. And so I didn't actually know how to spell his name until his Twitter around 2015. His Twitter says Sin Kev Itch. Like it says Sin hyphen Kev Itch. And I was like, now that's forever in my head.
That's great.
Awesome. So, okay, there was a reason I asked you, Tony, because Curtis, how Kung Fu is that story?
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like, you know, you meet the master comes down to the mountain to help you out in your time of need, you know, and that's what I love about comic books. Like I started at Malibu when I was like 15, Malibu Comics back in the day when I was like 15 years old as an intern. And I don't know about you guys, but back then we couldn't tell what these creators look like. You know, they were just these names, and you visualize them like their characters, you know, and then you meet them, and some of them are a little frumpy, a little nerdy, that kind of stuff. And you start to realize that they are just like the superheroes at the conventions. You see them in their glory and their superpowers, but when they go to the grocery store, nobody's going, you know, oh my God, it's Bill Sienkiewicz, you know, or oh my gosh, it's, you know, Grant Morrison or whatever, you know, and there's an approachability to that, right? And I think all of us kind of come from that background.
They are just people, really. Like any like celebrity, they are just human beings who got a level of success in a certain field.
Definitely. And the best ones are the ones that realize that and know that, you know, and you know, definitely. And usually those are the guys at the top, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, and also Curtis, I mean, in some ways, it reminds me a little bit of the trailer you showed us, meaning like. This is not an analogy, but I simply mean a master even becoming aware of you and encouraging you. And then, you know, obviously in your story, Curtis, a master saying, I want you to like teach and really taking you under his wing. There's just such a feeling of gratitude that comes with that, right?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think the thing is kind of in a nutshell, my teacher was very harsh to me, like just brutal, you know, and I never thought that he really liked me or anything per se.
Right.
In fact, if I didn't practice, he would just chew me out more than anybody else. You know, he'd lace into me, and I'd see the guy next to me not training, and he wouldn't get chewed out. And finally, one of my elder Kung Fu brothers, you know, classmates says, "You know why he's chewing you out?" I said, "No." He goes, "He's got plans for you." And years later, when I finally left the school to go out on my own, that's when he told me I should teach. And I had a classmate write this letter for me. I wrote a letter in English and had been translated into Chinese because of the language barrier. And just said how much I appreciated what he taught me, everything that he learned, how much I wanted to be like him. And his English has never been that great, but he's very eloquent. And he just looked up at me and he said, Curtis, he goes, finding a good teacher is hard, isn't it? And I said, yeah. And he goes, so is finding a good student, you know? And that's what, you know, Bill Sienkiewicz probably sees in you and all that. I mean, any of us that do any of these things, especially comic books, you gotta love it, and you have to be in it for the
Yes.
long haul. I mean, and it hurts. It hurts making a book, you know? And how many times, I hope it's not me. I mean, have you ever sat in that room, pardon my French, but freezing your ass off going, what am I doing here? Like, am I ever going to get done with this freaking thing? Does anybody understand it? And does anybody appreciate it? You know?
Yes.
And so, you know, my hat's off to anybody that sticks with it. And I'm sure that's what he saw in you too, because for as many people come up to him and say, oh, hi, Mr. Sienkiewicz, I want to do comic books. How many actually finish a book?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think also it's because I'd known him for so many years. It's not like you know someone for 1 year and then they're like, oh, give me a quote or something. I think he saw that, like all of us, we're in the trenches. We're doing this consistently over 12 years, 20 years. You know, I think people notice who actually is doing it when it's not glamorous, because most of the time it's not glamorous, you know?
No, totally. Yeah. I know somebody graduated from the Kubert School, and I was saying something about martial arts, but he said, oh, my teacher at the Kubert School said the same thing. And it was, people would come and study with me. I had students and they would say, I want to be a master. And I almost want to laugh at them, because it's like, well, try being a student first, you know? Yeah. And those are always the ones that would quit. They like the idea of being a master.
There's a fantasy, there's an idea, but they're not in love. Joe Quesada said something like, once you've drawn 100 pages or some large number that he gave, maybe you'll have a hint of understanding of storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, he said, like, it might take 300 pages to get really good, you know?
No, totally. And it's the little things, like when Eli opened up the book and just took a big whiff of that newsprint. We all know that, right? Like that's a comic book fan, right? Like when you go into the comic book shop and for some reason it's like you're in a cathedral, you know, like the light shines in from the window, you hear the choir and you smell that newsprint, right? That kind of Akron's newsprint. That's what we're there for, right? You know. So.
And Patrick, you have also lived that life. I mean, you've put in so many hours of writing and drawing and lettering, right? Your own stuff.
Yeah, all of it, cover to cover. It's all, well, the exception is spotting the typos. Someone else is in charge of that, which is why there are typos in the book. But hey, that's me too.
Yeah. And Eli,
that's the hardest thing to do.
Yes. You've Eli. I mean, when did you first start reading comics, Eli?
I mean, I don't even think that's a question I can answer, because I just don't remember a time they weren't something I was doing, because my dad was into it. You know, he read Mad Magazine. He's a huge Superman fan. And so just growing up, it was all comics. I grew up with my best friends from Temple, and like my dad's friend, they owned a bookstore. Oh, wow. And that's where, like, my dad grew up. That guy's dad also owned the same bookshop. Again, I'm from a small town in Maryland, so one of my earliest birthday gifts that I can remember is this subscription at the bookstore, where I would go in every Saturday or Wednesday, you know, whenever new comic, because it wasn't Wednesday, I don't think, back then, but I would go in and I would get like free comics. They would buy whatever this thing, so I would get free comics every week for that entire year. And that's what he would give me for my birthday every year. And so I would always go in there and you know, go around the spinner rack and look at everything, and they would let me get whatever I wanted. And so it was just always comics, always there. And you know, so it's just something that I can always remember. Yeah. Just because my dad was into it, and reading was always big. And like my mom and her family were really into like the Sunday comics in the newspaper. And so like there was a thing where my mom would be cooking and she would say, you know, read me the comics. Oh, cool. So we would like read the comics, but like act them out and like do voices and, you know, kind of like, you know, so just comics in all these different forms were just always there. And like Calvin and Hobbes quickly became huge because I was a mischievous kid who was always getting into trouble. And so Calvin was me, you know, and like I loved it. And I had this imagination that's, you know, became writing comics. And so it was just, comics were always part of the equation for me, I feel like. And I made my first comic that I can remember. I found all these old notebooks, but I made a Star Trek comic with my friend Levi in third grade. I found some old like,
and it's in there, right?
I put in this thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, so like that was always there. And like, I like doing that with my books. I created this character Jester Man when I was a kid, just because we went to like a ski store or something, and I found a Jester hat like that, and just it all started going. And my mom sewed this big J onto a shirt.
Nice.
And I wore boxer shorts over top of my sweatpants because like superheroes always had the underwear over top.
Yes.
I thought it was funny to have like your Joe boxers like over top of it. So like there was always
we're big advocates of putting a little bit of your childhood artwork in your books.
Yes, exactly. We had to do that. Once you mentioned it for your book too, we were like, we got to get it. And then it became. Now your childhood artwork is like very good though. Those Star Wars drawings.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good.
But it makes me think of when Alex Ross on Twitter like 3 or 4 years ago put up like his 7-year-old drawing, of Superman, and it's it's better than an average 7-year-old's obviously, but there's a charm to it because he was drawing constantly when he was a kid,
nonstop. Had no idea where he would go. He went, to the top. It's insane.
He redefined the genre. He kind of created his own genre just with that photorealistic look.
Absolutely. That new FF book he put out was very good. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, Curtis, I feel like you and Patrick could do a 2-hour podcast. Tell your stories about Malibu comics.
Totally. Yeah, but we should, and Patrick and I, after we're done, we'll have a little bit of a talk before and after the show. We go, we should just record this, because Patrick and I get along so well, so it's.
And Malibu and Marvel had like crossovers and stuff.
Well, yeah, Marvel bought out Malibu,
right.
And everybody has a Stan Lee story, but I gotta tell my Stan Lee story because I got to meet him twice through Malibu. The first time, the second time he was in the office, and you just get to hear Stan Lee say your name, when he says, "Hi, Curtis," and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy." But I was outside of San Diego Comic-Con in 94, 95. The launch of this series called Ultraverse. It was the Ultraverse line of comic books.
Yes.
And so I had these ash cans. I was a teenager intern. They threw me outside. Okay, you have this huge stack of ash cans. You got to hand them out to everybody. And I'm so meek and mild. People are walking by and I'm trying to hand it to them and nobody will take it. And I'm not asserting myself and nobody knows what the Ultraverse line is. And right outside, if you've been to Comic-Con, right, that one area right outside the exhibit halls. And through the crowd, I see Stan Lee. And he's walking and he sees me trying to hand this stuff out. And he just freezes in his tracks and looks at me, and he's got those Ray-Bans, with that like maroon brown tint, you know what I'm talking about? And he looks at me and then boom, he just starts walking towards me really fast. And I'm almost going to have a heart attack because 1, Stanley, 2, oh my God, he's coming up to me. What am I going to do?
Right.
And he gets up to me and he's so dramatic. He stops in his place and he yells at me and he goes, "What do you got?" And I go, "Oh, the Ultraverse comic book ash can." And he goes, "I want it." And he grabs one, yanks it out of my hand, and then just storms off. And the whole crowd is watching. And one by one, all the fanboys, well, Stan Lee wants it. So they all come up to me one by one, and they all take my comic book, and my job's done for the con. And talk about a giving person, right? It just took him a second. But he helped this kid out. And that's me, right? Wow, what an amazing guy. So that's like.
By the way, Patrick, are we recording this? I hope this is recorded and not just live stream.
Oh, we'll have a recording as a result of the live stream. So
please,
yes, for sure.
Tony, I feel like you need a podcast, man. You've definitely been like leading this around.
Yes, please.
There's a part of me that like fantasizes about being a talk show host.
I can see you doing it.
Go for it.
I'll become a famous actor, then I'll be washed up, and then I'll have a talk show.
Got it. Yes.
We'll find you at Has Been Alley, 30 years from now.
The signing
door number 3.
But I seriously love that stuff. I love, facilitating discussion. And also I know that I can talk forever. So I try to resist that tendency in myself to just talk.
Makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things I love about these kind of what we're doing here is the chance to for me to listen really and to play like alchemist, right? To like get people together and see see the fireworks that happen and the stories that bubble up as, you know, we all have this love of comics, right? We all have these parallel stories, but there's a lot that's you know, unique to each one story, you know.
Well, and like you said, it's very similar. Comics, actors, writers who write prose, writers who write novels, musicians, journalists, painters. Unless you sat your ass in the chair for years doing the thing, like, we understand it. You know, it might be harder for others who never did that thing to fully relate, but we have a tribe of people. We all may have done different aspects, but we know what that feels like, you know.
Definitely. And when we see the characters, like, you know, the ones on Eli's one, stuff like that, you know, sometimes people won't understand. They'll say, why do you still like comic books? You know, you're an adult and so forth and so on. Like, we grew up with those characters, right? Those are our friends. That's who we grew up with. So it's just the same as when I open a comic book, it's like hanging out with my friends from growing up. You know, those are the people that I grew up with, right? And so that's why we saw that bond, I think.
Hi,
my dad's watching.
And hi, Dad.
All right. Hey, Dad. Hello.
Hey, Eli, Dad.
How can we see who else is on there?
I just texted him the chat, so I just know that he's watching because he's texting me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I think unless they comment, we're only guessing, you know.
Exactly. We need those comments.
But I mean, everyone should go out to cosmiclionproductions.com and pick up Tony's book.
Yes, please.
At least Tony's book, because there's a lot of stuff on there.
We tried to give people a lot of bang for your buck. $20 for 220 pages. It is a thick book. There is a spine. I'm so happy to have, I have a spine in my life as a human being, and I have a spine now as a book. And there's some political cartoons in the back showing my very liberal Democrat bent as I protested against the Trump administration and the Republicans. There's some human interest stories. There's wacky food stories, including the McRib. I want to point out one quick thing. You know, when you're doing a story and you realize, when you write and draw your own stories, you can write to your strengths as an illustrator. And Patrick and Eli both, and maybe Curtis as well. Have you ever had that experience?
Oh yeah, definitely.
100%.
So I was writing this and I knew that I could draw. There was an opportunity. The McRib was a tie-in sandwich when the Flintstones live action movie came out. And I was like, I could draw John Goodman. Not that I'm great with likenesses, but I had so much fun looking up pictures of John Goodman and drawing. So one of my great joys of this comic was drawing John Goodman as Fred Flintstone.
That's awesome. That's great.
Is that originally where the sandwich came out with, or no, it said right there it was re-released.
The sandwich it was already like, the sandwich originated, I think, in 81 or 82. And the Flintstones movie was 94. But by that point, the McRib was like this tired old thing that they trotted out sporadically like it is now.
For the Flintstones, it would be made of Brontosaurus burger and not
Yes, exactly.
To quote the weirdest of owls.
Yeah.
But the great thing about writing your own comics is you can put any damn thing you want in them, you know.
Totally.
There it is. Oh yeah, and you can get the signed and sketched version. Tony, how you doing with all those? How many more you got left?
Oh, I have a bunch. Because I have a day job. Because I have a day job, and I'm also trying to ship out like review copies to try to get some more buzz and things. But I have about 16. I've done about 5. I've done about 6. But I have, I think, 16 more where people paid a little extra. And I sign it, but more so, I do a drawing in the back. There's one blank page at the end of the book. And also, part of the reason it's taking a while, I want to give people a good drawing. I don't want to like do a doodle. So I'm taking like an hour for each of these on average. So I'm trying to give them and trying to tailor it. A lot of people requested certain things. So yes, you can. I love that Eli wrote, "What should Tony draw?" and you can draw whatever, you can request whatever you like. I've gotten some strange requests, and I've gotten some normal quote requests. So
Excellent.
But
I just typed in a McRib sandwich, but that's okay.
That would be fun to draw.
But thank you.
It
thank
like
you
the
guys.
Hamburglar.
Yeah.
Yes. The Hamburglar. And Derek Robertson, who co-created The Boys, obviously now the Amazon hit show, he gave a quote as well, which is on the cover.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, you managed to get some amazing quotes there, Tony. I mean,
well, thank you. A lot of it, my dad is a salesman, and so he instilled this in me. A lot of it is about building long-term relationships. Like most of those quotes that I got are people that I've known, even if I've known them just through social media. Some of them are social media, some of them are people I've met, but it's like a slow burn of like 9 years or 12 years of having an acquaintance with someone. I don't, and really like, I think there's like a sincere way to network. Like there's networking that has a heart of sincerity. And I really always try not to do the other kind of networking, which is like, I barely know you, but what can you do for me? You know? And anyone that I have built that with is someone who I really genuinely like and admire. I don't really do that with people whose work I don't resonate with, you know? And I really I care about them as a person, not just because they're like a person in power who could help me, you know? And if they never helped me, I would still have that acquaintance with them or friendship or whatever, you know? So that's been the result of, I think, most of those. I don't really want to come in hot and be like, give me something, person who barely knows me, you know? I'm not in.
That's exactly why I really wanted you to be a part of what we're doing here, Tony.
Well,
I mean, aside from the fact that we get a chance to chit chat and, you know, touch base again, but just, you know, the stuff that you're saying now needs to be recorded, and it needs to be put out there for all those youngins who are just now deciding, you know, whether or not they want to be a comic artist or a writer or publisher, you know? So yeah. Thanks,
it's all
man.
about making connections, and it's not super hard too. It's really just about writing a letter or an email, or just making the connection to reach out, to go like one more step beyond like a DM or like a, you know, just a personal chat or something like that. If you can make that one more step and, you know, write a professional email or something, it really goes a long way. And when I started doing podcasts too, way back in the day when you told people you had a podcast and they'd say, what is a podcast?
Yeah.
You know, like I used to get that so often, and it was just like, it seemed like it was one day all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, yeah, I got a podcast too, you know. But like, you know, there's a lot of people you just write to, shoot for the moon, and, you know, sometimes you get them. And, you know, I was just a dude in the office in Tampa, Florida at that time. And, you know, I got to interview, you know, everyone I wanted to, basically. Matt Wagner, Mike Allred, even Kevin Eastman. I was like on his press list, I think, until he realized that I was just a dude with like 30 people listening. But like, I got to interview him 2 times, which was just like amazing, you know. And it's just like they say, you fake it till you make it. Just do it. Just write the emails and see who will respond, you know.
Also,
who can
real
you
quick,
fool into thinking you're important?
Yes. 2 things real quick. One is that even when you send those professional emails or you make those sincere efforts based out of sincerity, a lot of times you're still going to get rejected or ignored, right? And that you have to factor that in and not be dissuaded by that, you know.
For sure.
But you have to make the effort if you want to make any headway.
Well, and sometimes you can learn something, because another person that I wrote to during that time period was LeVar Burton, someone I love, obviously. And I didn't get nothing. His people wrote back to me and was like, oh, can you send us numbers on your podcast? Here's this website that you go to. You put your URL in and it'll give you all this information. And of course, like, it wasn't good enough for them, but I learned about that website. I learned that some people won't come on unless you have this many people listening. And if you don't have this much spread, you know, so you learn a little bit of how, like, okay, what level can I get up to where, you know, I could take a look into a book into this video. you know.
Also, the other quick thing I wanted to mention that isn't even about comics. One of the things I really love and respect about Eli, I'm a huge music fan. I think some of our musical tastes cross over and some may not be the same. But Eli also knows a ton about a varied panoply of music. And you've interviewed musical greats as well, jazz and
that's
funk.
The original podcast Cosmic Lion Radio was about both things, comics and music. So when I would interview comic book artists, we'd always talk about the music they were creating and or the music that they were listening to while they were creating. And it was part like interview show, part mixtape. So it was a lot. I was very influenced by like college radio, and also Jim Mahfood had a podcast called the Beat Bee Sessions. That was just a mix. And then so it grew to like, you know, talking with Kevin Eastman about what music they were listening to in the Mirage, you know, dojo while they were like creating Turtles, and talking with all those people. And then, you know, I interviewed this guy who was like a sound man for Frank Zappa and for Bootsy Collins, and giving me his personal recordings to play, or, you know, different people like that, bands who have, you know, songs that are about to come out that we played and stuff. And so Cosmic Lion Radio is still up. Most places you can get your podcasts, and you can get those interviews for good or ill. They're not all great. And my technology was only so good back then. I would have to plug my phone through an 1/8-inch cable into like a little box that box went to USB into the computer. Or, you know, sometimes I would just put my phone on speakerphone before I had that little Behringer box, you know. And so there was all these different technologies that, you know, were going for podcasts back then. But it was good. It was good. It was so much fun.
And it was a passion project.
Exactly. And I'll still do them. Like the podcast is still active. Like I only did one last year, and I didn't do any the year before. And then there was maybe like 2 the year before that. But, you know, it still goes. And I've got 2 other podcasts. So
excellent.
Let us know while we got you. What are your other podcasts?
Well, the other one, Cosmic Lion Radio kind of came to a stop when I interviewed this dude, Manus Dunbar, who's become one of my best friends. He's a hip hop MC who also writes like music about comics, and also is a big comic book reader and avid fan. And so then we, like, once I interviewed him, we became friends, and then we kind of started our own podcast where we hang out and read comics together and have a beer. Like we'll basically like have a whole day. We'll go out to a few comic shops, get some stuff, maybe find, you know, a vintage t-shirt or sell something or do something, and read comics together, have a couple beers, and then we'll like record the podcast and talk about our whole day. And so it became a very topical, like, new comic book day, beer, you know, hang out podcast, play some of his new music, talk about my new stuff. And then the other one is the Devil in Detail, the Grendel reread podcast, where we go issue by issue through Grendel with Ben Granoff. And at the end of every like run, we talk to the creative team. Matt Wagner's been super supportive. So we've had Matt on there many times. Diana Schutz. I think we did the final Tim Sale interview. Much love to Tim Sale. Teddy Christensen, the Pander brothers, John K. Snyder, and Jay Geldof. And so we're just working through it all now. We just finished the War Child era, and so now we're launching into Grendel Tales, which is exciting.
Very cool.
And Eli, can you talk about the editor you're working with these days? Or is that?
Yes, Tony. Thank you. I recently took a assistant editor kind of, what does she call me? I don't know. She has a different non-assistant title for me, but Shelly Bond from Vertigo Comics, and who's got her off-register press right now. I'm working with her. She's got a class coming up that's an editing course that any comic book maker really should take to help themselves. It's every Tuesday. I think it's every Tuesday in February.
That's the Filth and Grammar. Is that
Filth and Grammar? Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the book that she put out. She's got a new book coming out called Fast Times in Comic Book Editing. That's a little bit more of a biographical thing, but also very much like a textbook. Not a book with text, but I mean a very insightful book that can help any comic book creator. So I've been working with her every Tuesday and hanging out with her and her immensely talented husband, Philip Bond, who, got his start in Deadline, working on Tank Girl, lived with Jamie Hewlett, and went to the, ghost penciled and inked Tank Girl through a lot of those times. So they're an amazingly interesting couple with so much to offer that I've really enjoyed hanging out and working for them the last month or so. So I'm excited for the possibilities there. And she's been helping me with my work moving forward too. So
nice.
Hopefully I can decrease the misspellings and typographical errors in my books.
Well, yeah, shout out to the Bonds. Talk about a superpower couple, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Hell yeah. Thanks for that tee up, Tony.
And Tony,
I want to be a talk show host.
Can you tell us about any of the new comic books you're creating or any comic stories that you're writing, perhaps for Tales from the Wolf 2, even Wolfing Harder?
So my approach, my dog has started to move, but not too much. My approach is still the same. I just want to keep on creating short stories and some one-off illustrations. I have a few short stories I've started now recently. My screen is flickering. I don't know why. One of which I started working on is about playing with Star Wars figures as a kid. It's specifically about the Death Star playset from Kenner Toys back when only the first movie had come out. I'm also working on illustrating only a story written by my friend who was a New York Times journalist, George Gustines. He has written over 700 or 800 bylines for the New York Times. He's mostly their main comic book coverage writer. And I have bugged him over the years to start writing short comic stories about his life and his life as a journalist for the New York Times and all of the people he's encountered and interviewed and just anecdotes from his growing up. And because whenever anyone says to me, maybe I would write an autobio short story, the minute I hear that, I become like a thorn in their side, like a cheerleader, like, yes, write your own short story. And every couple months, I'm like, have you written a short story yet? Meaning like they don't have to draw it. They could find an artist to execute it. For sure. And this guy, George, he knows tons of great artists, tons, many of which are close friends of his. Some are celebrities, some are not celebrities at all, but they're terrific artists. So he has started putting together a bunch of short stories. And given that he has been at the New York Times as an editor and a journalist for 15 years, I think he'll have a pretty good chance of finding a publisher. So he's come up with about 6 plots so far, things from his childhood or his life. And he showed me the 6 plots, and he's going to eventually have, need to have like 14 or 15 short stories. And I said, I will draw. Years ago, I was like, George, write short stories. I will draw one of them. And whatever, like I'm volunteering to draw at least one short story. And he showed me a couple plots and I said, oh, I want that one. And it's about friendships he made through comic book letter columns in the early 80s and how he started being pen pals with people through like the Teen Titans, the George Perez, Marv Wolfman Teen Titans. And some of those pen pal friendships changed his life. Not about being a professional comics journalist, but about something very personal for him. And those friendships really affected his life in a deeply positive way. And when I heard that story plot idea, I was like, that's my story. I can see myself drawing it. I can see the pages. I think it's going to be between 7 and 9 pages. I'm on page 4 right now. So I've already drawn almost half the story or a little more than half the story. And I also feel privileged and honored because it's a very personal story for him. And I've become very good friends with him again over like 12 years. And I'm so excited about the story. I just wish I had more free time in my life to execute that story. But I'm going to get it done. And he said, don't rush. Make it, take your time and do it when you have time and you're, and I said, yeah, I want to push myself because you guys know how it is. If you only do it when you have loads of free time, it might not get done. I'm pretty good with pushing myself, but now I also have to draw in my own book for the people that paid extra for the sketch drawings. So, but I'm going to get these things done. And I just did a pinup, a one-page illustration for Adam Lemna's book, Relic Hunter, which Eli is also publishing. I love doing pinups for other people's books because I know that with my limited free time, I know I can do one drawing. I know I can do one page, right? And then I can complete it and hand it off, and it will be in their book. If they have a lot of pinups in the back, by various people. So right now, that's what's on my plate. Really working hard on this story about. It's called "I Was a Teenage Letter Hack," and I get
I think you might have shared some of that.
What's that?
That title sounds so familiar. Did you share like any sketch work?
I've put little teasers up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook sporadically, just to kind of let people know that we're doing this story together. So I have George's story that I'm illustrating. I have my own short stories, anecdotes, funny anecdotes from my life. I have a bunch of others that I have in mind that I just haven't had time to draw yet. I have the pinup coming out from Relic Hunter collection. When do you think that'll be published, Eli? I know that Relic Hunter collection is pretty close.
Yes, we're hoping for February or March. I have it on the calendar as February, so hopefully then.
Cool. Awesome. So that's it. And I just backed Patrick's Kickstarter.
So did I.
First 55. You're part of that core group that's moving it forward. That we're on the march.
Well, I have volume 1, and I also have the volume 1 from like 8 years ago or 9 years ago, right?
Yeah, the original black and white. I might have a copy of it. It's I call it the early reader edition. I only printed like maybe 10 of them. It's the whole manuscript in black and white.
Nice.
And
only 10?
Yeah. I only wanted like people that I really trusted because the story wasn't complete. And the thing is like volume 1, which is, I kickstarted last year, only took up about this much of the actual story. And so volume 2 is a nice fat chunk, look at that difference.
Nice.
Right. And so since then, I mean, you would know, since then, the story has changed significantly. If you were to compare the black and white comic to the color version, it's evolved. Cool. And I mean, that's part of what I love about comics and what I love about working on that comic in particular is that it's always evolving every step of the way.
Well, and the great thing is when you are writing and drawing it and there's no editor like telling you things, you can change it midway through. You have that power.
Yeah. But then it was also, great gratitude to those early readers like yourself who gave me the feedback that really helped put the story in perspective and helped me make some key decisions like splitting the book and really focusing on, the best parts that I could do, make volume 1 as good as it could be, make volume 2 as good as it could be, and so, and then, since I'm taking it to Kickstarter, coloring it, I originally imagined it as a black and white comic, but I decided it's Kickstarter. I'm going for young readers. I got to deliver the colors too. So that's like another new level, where all the artwork is being remastered so that I could deliver, color.
The YA audience, as they say.
Exactly.
Now, have you guys been podcasting since like 6 hours ago?
Off and on.
Off and on.
A little bit of a break, coffee break here and there.
Yeah, we took
and we have our breaks, so we're good.
Wow.
But This is the moment. This is our another kung fu style we're developing, right? Our podcast kung fu.
Yeah, definitely.
Endurance, and persistence.
Definitely.
Exactly. That's how we get to the 100% mark or beyond, as I think we all know.
Exactly.
You guys should really interview Jerome Cabanatan, who is another artist from our group, who's a Taekwondo teacher, and who uses his comics to teach Taekwondo, and that's originally how he got started. I guess he made his first book on a mouse on the old computer in his Taekwondo studio.
Wow, that's if you could put us in touch with him, I think that would.
Yeah, definitely absolutely will. He's an amazing guy to talk to. So much fun.
Excellent.
100%. We're all for it. We like I said, we're just trying to build that forest of connections, not just for our own book, right? We're not just like, here, buy our book. We're more like, here, let's get some conversations going where we can all kind of see, that kung fu isn't, even though kung fu is mystical, it's not, it's also, real,
Definitely. Well, I guess as we're gonna close it up now, huh? And we'll get ready for our next guest. But just such a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. It was just fascinating and great to hear how passionate you are about your project.
Thank you. Eli just put that guy in the chat there.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
okay.
Just put Jerome's Instagram in there. Just tell him I sent you.
Okay, excellent. Right. We'll do.
We will definitely do that.
Is your next guest your final guest, or do you have another guest after that?
Well, we're gonna take, I think, like a little break, and then we'll have our next guest is a musician, and actually he's a kung fu artist and a musician, and he actually did a music video for my comic book, so he might play a little bit of that too. So
very cool.
Nice. His name's Capitan Wallace, so he'll be coming up shortly.
We're entering our after dark mode.
Yes,
so.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I just mean, is that your last guest, or do you have another guest after that?
He will be. He'll be our last guest, as far as I know.
Yeah, that'll be it. We'll party with Capitan Wallace and then take a nap.
And by the way, Patrick, you're in California. Where are you, Curtis?
I'm in Southern California, but LA. Okay. So he's up in the Bay Area, down south. Not too far.
And we're in LA as well. Woodland Hills, actually.
What about?
I'm in Woodland Hills.
Actually. Woodland Hills. Yeah, I'm in West LA near Westwood. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
not too far.
Yeah, definitely. Hang out sometime.
Right, and Patrick, you're San Francisco, is that right? Or
I live on a little island called Alameda, which is in the San Francisco Bay. So you have to go through Oakland, Chinatown, go under a tunnel, and then you pop up on this little island that's like the land that time forgot.
Wow.
It's like old Victorians and big trees, people ride around on bicycles, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on the whole island.
Wow.
It's like this little oasis. And then you go through the tunnel and it's Chinatown, Oakland,
Cool.
Nice. Oh, come on over. The beach is just 2 blocks away. So come on over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got some
Eli, I don't know. I sense a Cosmic Lion Malibu Comics retrospective coming up.
I like the sound of it.
Great. Yeah, Curtis, let's stay in touch, man.
Or definitely. You know what? This is my editor brain now. What if it's a piece for Wizard 3 about Malibu Comics history?
Oh,
that would be great. Good. Because historically, Malibu was always trying to make inroads into Wizard magazine and had a really hard time. Hard time. So this would be
maybe a lot of money on ads, I think.
Yeah. So I think this will be a good cap on that. So yes.
All right. Yes, we'll stay in touch.
Thanks. Look at that. You've seen it here first, folks.
Yes.
The
seeds are sown.
Well, because honestly, that's a chapter in comics history that I don't see that much coverage of.
No, and you'd like to think it would be because of the connection with Marvel,
Yes.
But it kind of got, I hate to say it, kind of got buried, but there's still people that are out there and passionate about it. And there's a secret Malibu story that I was planning to reveal on this show at some point. I'll be announcing it, but that Dragon Ball Z had something to do with a certain Ultraverse comic book, but only maybe 3 people know about it. Wow. And this is one of them. So that's I'll drop that hint for later.
Well, stay tuned for a future episode, folks.
You know how the elongated man in DC Comics, his nose twitches when he smells a mystery. With my comics, especially the ones I did for the New York Times, my nose twitches when I smell a good story. And I feel like your untold Malibu stories. And when my nose twitches, it also is like my Tony brain goes, I haven't heard enough coverage of this topic, whatever it is, in the pop culture press. So I know that therefore I think it would be a compelling story that a bunch of strangers would read who don't have reason to give a shit about us. Right? That's my nose is twitching, man. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, you know where to find me.
It's like,
and you really would make a good elongated man in
I would like to.
a DC movie.
I am his physical type, right? His face. It's almost like in Bewitched when her nose, her nose twitches.
I mean, we'd have to dye the hair red, but
that's great. They did have the elongated man on The Flash, by the way, and the guy kind of looked like me, the Flash TV show.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yes,
we'll just have to let James Gunn know,
Yes, exactly. All right.
Well, very good.
Thank you so much, guys, for having us on.
Thanks, guys. It was amazing.
Yeah, great talking with you. Great to meet you. And I guess Patrick will close off saying goodbye to everybody, and we'll just finish with our trailers. And we always add a little post-credit sequence, right? Do you have something queued up?
I do have something queued. It's what I wasn't going to play this morning, so I have it for this evening.
Okay. Great.
So
yeah,
for anyone who wants to stick around, we have some credits, right? And then we have our little bullet at the end, our little Marvel-esque post-credit something or another.
Excellent. All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Daisy says goodbye too. Thank you, Eli, for joining us as well.
Thank you, Eli.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Hi, I'm Plugo, author, illustrator, comic creator, and the art director for Kung Fu Magazine for more than 20 years. But I'm here to talk to you about a project that's really special to me. It's the middle grade graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale. Imagine the story of tigers and dragons and martial artists and monsters. So when I launched the campaign for A Tiger's Tale Volume 1, I did not know what to expect. But it succeeded thanks to a group of passionate backers. It was also awarded the Make More Comics art grant that year and was later featured as part of an art gallery exhibit. And that's why I'm coming to Kickstarter, to cover production fees, printing, copy editing, things like that. Books completed, with the exception of a few pages I've set aside for color over the course of the campaign. This turned out to be a popular feature of Volume 1's campaign, so I thought I'd bring it back for Volume 2. I think it's going to be great fun for everyone. Hope you'll support the campaign. I'm very excited about it. Thanks for stopping by.
As a kid, I loved Kung Fu movies. So I went to Chinatown, trained with a wise teacher, and became a Kung Fu master. Sounds simple, right? Not really. My journey, like the study of Kung Fu, was as arduous as it was rewarding, filled with as many secrets as revelations and as much heartache as triumph. It's a defining moment in my life, and while I began studying Kung Fu to learn how to fight, what I discovered was a way to live. Martial arts never came easy to me. I was far from talented and even farther from being the chosen one. It was only through years of tenacious perseverance that I was able to make steady progress. And so, I was surprised when my master told me that I should teach Kung Fu and share the art outside of Chinatown. I did just that and taught Kung Fu to my own students for 20 years. I always wanted to do more to share the art of Kung Fu with others, but was limited by only being able to teach those within my immediate area. What about the rest of the world? Then one day, I had one of the deepest insights about Kung Fu. I realized that the punches, kicks, throws, and myriad of martial maneuvers are merely the delivery system for the true essence of Kung Fu, the philosophy and way of life. Having worked for years as a professional artist and storyteller in film, animation, video games, and comic books, I realized that I could draw upon this unique skill set to share my passion for Kung Fu with the greater world. And so I created Shadow Ghost, a Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. The first issue is created entirely by myself, from story and art to colors and lettering. Every panel is filled with unprecedented accuracy in its depiction of Kung Fu by a comic book creator who knows from first-hand experience what it means to be a Kung Fu master. Shadow Ghost is a martial arts coming-of-age story about a young man whose search for the truth about a legendary hero leads him to study Kung Fu, and through a twist of fate becomes part of the legend himself. For the first time in comic book history, you can immerse yourself further in each issue with Kung Fu skills technology, powered by Tiger Crane Kung Fu. Scan the QR code at the back of the comic and follow an exclusive link to an online instructional video where I teach you Kung Fu techniques featured in this series. With Kung Fu skills technology, you can do more than just read about the Shadow Ghost saga. You can become a part of it. The first issue is completely finished and ready for print. All that's needed is for you to make a pledge of support so that we can fund the printing of the first issue. Together, we can share the wisdom of Kung Fu with the greater world. Shadow Ghost is the story of Kung Fu. It's about the people, the art, the culture, and the philosophy. It's my story and the story of those that I've learned from, taught, fought, and loved. Join me and become part of the vibrant legacy in a place and time where we might not be the chosen one, but where we can make a choice to be part of something bigger and greater than just ourselves. I'm Sifu Curtis Fujita, and this is Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master.
Welcome to the Comics Fu Show.
Hey everybody, I'm Curtis Fujita. I'm a Kung Fu instructor. I'm the head instructor of Tiger Crane Kung Fu. I'm also a comic book artist and I've worked in video games, animation, things like that. I'm currently the creative director at Silverline Comics and the creator of the upcoming comic book Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. So welcome everybody.
I'm Patrick Lugo, former art director at Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine.
All right, Curtis, I want to introduce you to someone special, our guest today. He's someone that I've worked with in the past. We've, he's a stalwart member of the Kung Fu Wu Land, right? The Kung Fu Forest. So let me introduce you to Jose Figueroa. Maybe you could give us and our vast audience of a handful, a little introduction of who you are, where you've been, and how you ended up here.
Well, my name is Jose Manuel Figueroa, originally from Santurce, Puerto Rico. Basically proud Boricua, been a part of just doing interesting work with Tai Chi, I guess. And I think my claim to fame has been really having a great teacher that came from China at a certain time that I was very interested and physically able to do Tai Chi. And in that process of learning this traditional discipline, I was able to contribute, along with my Kung Fu brother, Stefan Berwick, some really great information to help facilitate teaching Tai Chi in North America. And I think that's one of the things that I personally loved about the discipline itself is what it provided for me on all planes, but also what it was able to provide for young people in the public city schools of New York City. So that was one of the things that we did. We wrote a book called the Tai Chi for Kids. Tuttle Publications did a really wonderful illustrations, with the paper, with the hardcover kind of booklet. And the goal was to get that into every public school in North America. But the physical aspect of doing that by yourself, not having enough people, it get daunting. But shout out to actually a company named Scan New York, the Supportive Children's Advocacy Network. They were like a not-for-profit that did work with special needs families and people that needed help. And Lou Zuckerman was the executive director of the company. Renee Avery was my boss, and they just allowed and facilitated some really amazing things with Tai Chi. And it started with just Tai Chi, but then it became something bigger. And what we was doing in Harlem, it was bringing a collective of martial arts of all styles onto a stage filled with 600 kids, like screaming, because they're watching a lion dance, on stage. And we were introducing them to Chinese culture. There was capoeira, there was a little bit of everything. And Scan New York was behind all of that. Lou was one of the guys that facilitated that. And at one point, I even was able to bring in my Tai Chi, the Yang style master, Master Derek Trent. And I brought him with Master Ren Guang Yi, my Chen style master. And there was a big Tai Chi performance with both styles on stage. And